Very good. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 7th, 2022 meeting of the Boulder City Council. We're going to get started with a couple of announcements and then call the meeting to order. So first announcement is about COVID-19 vaccinations. Testing. For information and provider locations for free COVID-19 testing, please go to www.boco.org/COVID testing. The Boulder site is 2445 Stasio Drive. That's open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if you need a vaccination, for vaccine information and provider locations, please go to www.boco.org/COVID vaccine. And for our second announcement, all right, council meeting day change. Beginning on July 14th, 2022, after our council break, city council meetings and study sessions will change from Tuesdays to Thursdays, with the start time remaining at 6 p.m. So this new meeting day will change some board and commission meeting times and the public comment sign-up timeline. For example, the planning board, the new meeting times will be the first, third, and fourth Tuesdays of the month at 6 p.m. For the Board of Zoning Adjustments, the new meeting times will be on the second Tuesday of the month at 4 p.m. The Design Advisory Board will meet on the second Wednesday of the month at 4 p.m. And the public comment sign-up timeline will open Friday before the meeting at 8 a.m. and close Wednesday before the meeting at 2 p.m. for a total of 5 days. And more information about the transition and its impacts can be found at bouldercolorado.gov/announcement/council-meeting-day-change. Okay, with that, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. And Alicia, can we do the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. And good evening, everyone. Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Friend.
Here.
Councilmember Joseph.
Present.
Spear.
Present.
Wallach.
Here.
Weiner.
Present.
And Yates.
Here.
Mayor, we have our quorum.
Great. All right. Well, next we're going to go into a Juneteenth declaration to be presented by Council Member Benjamin. Matt, please take it away.
Thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate it. I want to first say this is incredibly important for our community and for communities across the country. And so it's just great pleasure to be able to read this declaration and recognize Juneteenth, Independence Day, as June 19th, 2022. June 19th is the oldest celebration of the emancipation of enslaved African Americans and is so named after the events that took place on June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas. On June 19th, 1865, Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas with news that the Civil War had ended and that the enslaved were free. Reactions to this were ranged from shock to jubilation. News of the end of slavery did not reach the frontier areas of the United States for more than 2 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of January 1st, 1863, and months after the conclusion of the Civil War. Even after word had spread, some slave masters chose to withhold the information, holding them as slaves through one more harvest season. Juneteenth is an example of America's commitment to liberty, and June 19th is celebrated and recognizes the historical significance of the end of chattel slavery in the United States as a whole. Many African Americans continue the tradition of celebrating Juneteenth as inspiration and encouragement for future generations. And for more than 155 years, Juneteenth Day celebrations have been held to honor African American freedom and while encouraging self-development and respect for all cultures. The fight for freedom does not exist in a vacuum, and the struggle against oppression and for sovereignty is one we collectively share and are inextricably linked to. Juneteenth celebrates the unity and mutuality of American liberty realized, which makes Juneteenth a celebration of freedom and justice for all Americans, not just those that were enslaved and their descendants. The faith and strength of character demonstrated by former enslaved African Americans remains an example for all people of the United States, regardless of background, religion, or race. The late Lula Briggs Galloway of Saginaw, Michigan, author, social activist, curator of African American history, and the originator of the interim Juneteenth Creative Culture Center and Museum in Saginaw, Michigan. Galloway successfully worked to bring national recognition to Juneteenth Independence Day and encouraged Congress to pass a resolution in 1997 in honor of the day. In continuation of those efforts, Ms. Opal Lee spent years lobbying Congress to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. Former educator, counselor, lifelong social impact leader, and considered the grandmother of Juneteenth, Ms. Lee stood alongside President Joseph R. Biden as he signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act on June 17, 2021, which officially recognized Juneteenth Day of observance, making June 19th a federal holiday. This year, the city of Boulder joins the federal and state government in commemorating Juneteenth as an official holiday. This year, the city will observe Juneteenth on Monday, June 20th. In celebration, the city's Human Relations Commission is co-sponsoring local events throughout the weekend in partnership with the NAACP Boulder County and Executive Committee, African American Culture Events, BOCO, and their second annual Boulder County Juneteenth celebration. This 5-day affair will include flag raising ceremonies across Boulder County, workshops, and celebration events. For more information, please visit the Executive Committee for African American Cultural Events webpage at ecaace.org. We, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, declare June 19th, 2022 as Juneteenth and recognize the historical significance of Juneteenth, support the continued celebration of Juneteenth to provide an opportunity for the people of the city of Boulder to learn more about the past, to better understand the experiences that have shaped the nation, and encourage the people of the city of Boulder to observe Juneteenth Day with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs. And the history and the plight of African Americans and all that was endured during chattel slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and civil rights movement is an example of pure resilience. This declaration underscores the freedom with dignity for every human being. As a governmental body, we oppose and reject any form of oppression and pledge to support our community members and local entities working to achieve equality and protect human rights. And with that, I believe that we have some members of our community from the NAACP. I think we have Dr. DeAndre Taylor and Madeline Woodley here to accept this declaration.
Yes, and thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Hello, my good friend, Councilwoman Joseph. It's good to see all of you. And thank you so much for this amazing dedication. Dr. Taylor is our project director. He also served last year as our project director. Of course, we were virtual then. We are in person. And for those people that are not able to come, we are creating a virtual production as well. So I'm going to stop here and have Dr. Taylor, the recipient, accept the award in the way he chooses.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Ms. Woodley. And thank you to the Council of the City of Boulder. And as the proclamation stated, Juneteenth is about resilience, but more importantly, it's about celebration and it's about doing what's right. And so as we go into to continue into this year of 2022, as we're faced with many things on our agendas, on our personal and professional lives, we want to make sure that we continue to think about that resilience. And so when we're all faced hardship in our many different ways, we want to think about this particular moment. And this is American history. Black history is American history. And we want to remember and pay respect and have deference to what was the history of this nation as we think about leading. And as you all, as members of a city government, really thinking about doing what's right. And I think that's really important as you all are facing the trials and the dilemmas of being leaders in this Boulder community. Always think about, and just think about to yourselves, doing something for a very long time and then actually being free and then not hearing about it until 2 years later. Think about one, the Jubilee that probably took place, but then think about the courage that happened after that. And so I implore all of you, as you all are leading in Boulder, to continue to have the courage to do what's right. And with that, I want to say thank you. We invite each and every one of you to attend any of our events. Of course, we have the wonderful flag raising ceremony that Boulder being not only one of the first last year that did a flag raising ceremony, but also is joining in this year. So we really appreciate the city of Boulder and the support. And Councilwoman Joseph, we always appreciate your support as well. And so with that, I want to say thank you. Looking forward to many more. And again, happy Juneteenth.
Thank you. Thank you again. I neglected to honor my good friend, Mayor Brockett. He's my tenor. You guys know he sings, right? So he's you can hit a note for us.
Right. Oh, right.
All right. Thank you so much. And of course, Amy Kane, one of my daughters. And thank you. Thank you again for this honor. And please, please, please join us. It's particularly on the 18th. I'll just mention this one because we're honoring kids ages 10 through 21. We're going to create the baddest choir you have ever heard. They're going to be dancing. We have dance classes by formal dance teachers, music instructors. We have African drumming, African dance. They're going to learn how to play the drums. It's going to be an amazing time. It's at the Longmont Museum from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. We're going to serving lunch with a great reception to follow. You got food, fun. We want to honor the kids. We want them to come out and have a good time, but yet learn something. Thank you. Thanks again.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Madeline. And so glad, Ms. Woodley, that you could be here and join us. And Dr. Taylor, really appreciate you being here. Thank you for your inspiring words. And look forward to seeing you at some of these Juneteenth events in a few days. It'll be a wonderful time. And so thank you and take care. All right. Well, that was fantastic. Next, we have another declaration. This is a declaration about Immigrant Heritage Month, and this will be read by Councilmember Wallach. So, Mark, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As I like to note, as the grandson of 4 immigrants and the husband to a daughter of immigrants, this declaration resonates strongly with me. Immigrant Heritage Month celebrates the generation of immigrants from every corner of the globe who have built our country's economy, created the unique character of our city, and are linked in a shared history. Immigrants have come here to work, to learn, and to find freedom and shelter. They're an important part of Colorado's history and continue to keep the workforce competitive, businesses innovative, and the economy strong. In addition to economic contributions, immigrants bring diverse perspectives and experiences that make for a unique social and cultural influence, fundamentally enriching the extraordinary character of our community. Immigrants have been steadfast leaders not only in securing their own rights and access to equal opportunity, but have also campaigned to create a fairer and more just society for all. Yet despite these countless contributions, the role of immigrants in building and advancing our nation has frequently been overlooked and undervalued throughout our history and continuing to the present day. Approximately 1 in 10 Boulder County residents is an immigrant, and this exceptional group of people adds to the variety of languages, customs, and cuisines which contributes to the cultural diversity enjoyed in the city. We, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, declare June 2022 as Immigrant Heritage Month and urge all to join in recognizing the distinct value that lies in welcoming people of different backgrounds and treating all with dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Mark. Do we have anyone present tonight to receive the declaration? That
I
looks
don't
like
believe we do, but perhaps staff can correct me on that. I don't believe we do.
Okay, no worries, but very important. Glad that we're designating the month of June for this very important occasion. Thanks to all. Okay, with that, we are now going to move into open comment. So Ryan, will you be sharing the guidelines with us tonight?
Yes, we'll plan to share those guidelines. They're coming up now, and we welcome community members who are here this evening to share perspectives, and want to make sure everyone knows the city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations, and that this vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members and staff and council, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. On the next slide, please. We want to share a few examples of rules of decorum found within the Boulder Revised Code and some other guidelines to support our time during this evening. We'll make sure these are upheld during this evening, and that all remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And participants are required to sign up using the name they are commonly known by, display that name, and audio testimony will be allowed this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Ryan. All right, so let's get going. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. And our first three speakers, and apologies if I get your name wrong, are Ramsey Abuita, Donovan Smith, and Gabriel Edmondson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ramsey Abueta. I have a degree in neuroscience and I work in clinical research. And I'm here to speak in favor of City Council passing a resolution to decriminalize psychedelics in Boulder. Over the past few months, we've organized numerous members of our community to speak up on their personal stories on how psychedelic medicines have helped or affected them. And it's about time for City Council to recognize the power of these stories. We've had 2 neuroscientists, a few therapists, a healthcare worker, the founder of a scientific research nonprofit, and so many more upstanding members of our community planning on speaking up today and in the future. We have a video testimonial from a pediatrician that I will privately email to City Council. It's clear as day that these medicines are helping so many people and that their continued criminalization stands contrary to anything that is sensible and just. That is why I ask City Council to review draft language for a resolution that will decriminalize these substances by making them the lowest law enforcement priority, which is the same model as applied by Oakland and Santa Cruz, California, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and about a dozen other cities around the country. Denver led the way in 2019 by decriminalizing psilocybin, and 2 years later released a report indicating that no negative effects had occurred after decriminalization. You can read the report online, and you know what? I'll just email the report to all of you. It's about time that Boulder follows suit and progresses towards this positive change. Boulder is already a cultural and research hub for psychedelics with a flourishing legacy community that has shown itself to be a responsible steward for keeping safe containers for the responsible use of these medicines. Let's let Boulder live up to its legacy by having City Council vote on a resolution to decriminalize psychedelics. I will email all of you draft language that you can give feedback on. Let's get this resolution on the agenda and bring it to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramsey. Next, we have Donovan Smith, Gabriel Edmondson, and Schuler Sowa.
Hey folks, my name is Donovan Smith. I'll be sharing why psychedelics should be decriminalized here in Boulder. I'm going to be really vulnerable and get pretty personal with you about some heavy topics, but I promise it's relevant. To jump right in, I grew up in a house where my queerness and being gay wasn't celebrated, but shamed because of religion. I hid and I hated who I was. I was so confused. I internalized the shame, and by my young adulthood, my story was filled with depression, self-harm, suicide attempts, anxiety, substance abuse, and ultimately a methamphetamine addiction. When I came out and left the church at 21 years old, my entire worldview was shattered. Without religion, what does life mean? Why am I here? I was thrown into the wild to fend for myself. I turned to existential philosophy, cosmology, Eastern religions, and sociology for answers, but I only found more questions. I was lost. It was actually my first LSD experience almost 5 years ago that started me on the journey of learning to be okay with the existentialism and reframing it as a curiosity for life, the unknown, and connection. It changed my life. Since then, it has taken years of painful lessons, therapy, and the best support system a human could ask for in order to heal. But integral to that healing has been microdosing psilocybin mushrooms. They have helped me to recover from addiction and stay clean from something that wants to kill me, create more space between negative thinking, what is actually true about who I am and my place in the universe, settle into my most authentic self, heal from trauma, and think freely without the crushing weight of depression. I can't help but smile when I think about all of this. My story has molded me into a mental health advocate. I work in community mental health here in Boulder, human rights activist, and a loud voice in the LGBTQ+ community. I am so grateful for how far I've come and who I am today. Psychedelics have played an invaluable and vital part in my story. I hope to one day live in a world and a city where folks can engage in these plant healing practices and feel empowered to do so without fearing the law. I am whole, and such medicines like psilocybin can help other people in Boulder learn to be whole too.
Thank you, Donovan. Next, we have Gabriel Atkinson, Shuler Soa, and Patrick Murphy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriel Atkinson. I'm a physical therapist in Colorado. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. My goal here, like those before me, is to speak in favor of decriminalizing psychedelics in Boulder by sharing my personal experience with psychedelics, which began as a recreational experience in college with fun in mind, but the incredible insight I unexpectedly gained through that experience solidified my decision to become a physical therapist. And so that's what I did. After several years in practice, however, I was concerned about that choice I had made. I contemplated leaving. All I was doing was following the orders of doctors who felt the job of a PT was to chase pain, which means to focus on the area of the body where pain was experienced and eliminate it. Never look for the source, and people returned again and again for the same issues as a result. So I decided to do a bit more work on looking at that source, and the treatments became much more meaningful, often created more sustainable changes. But something was still missing because I needed to deal with the patient's mental states, the fears about how the injuries would slow their lives down, how the scary reports from the MRI would lead to irreversible changes or future surgeries, how they would certainly get out of shape and be incapable of taking care of their kids or grandkids. So I immediately introduced the mindfulness-based stress reduction program and began referring to psychologists and other mental health professionals when people were open. Even better results emerged as a result of that. But it wasn't until a patient discreetly mentioned that she had used psilocybin and as a result transformed the way she saw herself and her injury that I realized this was a missing piece of the puzzle. I've admittedly explored these substances personally many times since then, always with the goal of helping me gain further insight into myself and to understand how they can be integrated into an efficient and effective treatment model if ever made available. And undoubtedly, the conclusion is that they can. So with the research quite compelling, the safety apparent, and the need more urgent than ever, I would urge the city to consider being on the forefront of this change and work to enable.
Your time is up, but thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, we have Shuler Soa, Patrick Murphy, and Harleen Singh.
Hello, my name is Skylar Soa, and I'm the founder of Connection Through Compassion. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak in favor of Boulder decriminalizing psychedelics. I was raised by emotionally unavailable parents and felt disconnected from life to the point that I did not desire to exist on this planet. 5 years ago marked the explosive ending of a codependent and unhealthy relationship I was in with a woman I relied upon to give my life value and purpose. The following 5 days after that were the most disconnected I felt, and I entertained thoughts of ending my life. Instead of ending my life, I decided to eat 5 grams of mushrooms containing psilocybin by myself in my apartment. Over the course of the next 8 hours, I processed and released trauma and discovered my connection to life. I visited my childhood experiences and remembered how wonderful I felt when I caused a person to smile. My experience with mushrooms that night resulted in my invention of kindness cards and the formation of the nonprofit Connection Through Compassion 1 year later. To date, we've given away over 50,000 handwritten kindness cards. And I actually wrote a kindness card tonight to show all of you, but realized that we're not permitted to have video. So it just says, thank you for being here. And I really mean that. I'm very glad that we're all here on this planet. Psychedelics have really supported me in knowing how valuable I am and how I desire to live my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Skylar. Sorry for getting your name wrong.
Okay.
Now we have Patrick Murphy, Harleen Singh, and Taylor Weekly. Oh, and I'll just mention, Skylar, if you're listening, you can certainly email us the thing that you mentioned if you'd like to share that with us. Thanks.
Okay, my name is Patrick Murphy. I've lived in Boulder 52 years. The planet burns, floods, and dies while Boulder fiddles with climate change. I know you've heard me say that many times. I say it repeatedly because it's true, and it's based on the observation of past performance, which is often the best indicator of future performance. In addition, current observation of the Boulder XL Advisory Panel meetings demonstrates that it's just a checkbox and a propaganda process where approaches are described, selected, and rejected based on what the leadership wants. And the 17 citizen members are often rich people who have gone carbon-free using lots of money, salespeople with their own agenda, or non-experts who supported the Muni and have no real capacity to critically review what they're being fed. The few independent thinkers on the panel have little weight. It's a conformational bias bubble. Slide 2. There's no room for direct confrontation and resolution of simple warped concepts such as the authentically additive farce and the in-state limitation that clearly demonstrates ignorance of what climate change is. An isolated bubble is clear since the multiple communications I've sent to the panel have not received a response from any of the 17 members. I've lots to learn, but I've learned how Boulder, a town I dearly love, has managed to fail on climate change. It's a combination of exceptionalism combined with arrogance. Years ago, in person, I asked the former mayor, Suzanne Jones, what was Plan B if the Muni failed? She stated confidently that Boulder had a Plan B, C, and D. That was false, unless Plan B, C, and D were to succeed at Plan A. So I ask you, what if Plan B fails and Boulder rejects giving more money to the same folks who led a failed Muni? Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Next, we have Harleen Singh, Taylor Weekly, and Celeste Landry.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Am I heard?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, my name is Harleen Singh, and I worked at a private medical office for a few years, and I'll be graduating with my bachelor's in Ayurvedic medicine in a week. And I'm speaking in favor for decriminalization of psychedelics in Boulder. I recently had a experience with my mom and sister. Actually, we did some psychedelics with a third-party therapist, and we uncovered a lifetime of subconscious patterning that we have towards each other within one night because of like how malleable your experience is when you're on psychedelics. And like I'd seen my own sister like treat me like she hasn't treated me since she was like a little kid, you know, just like googly-eyed and happy, and there's no wall between us. And I was a little worried it would be gone the next day, but it was the same the next day. It's been the same. It's been 2 weeks now, and it's the same now. It was almost like a switch flipped for her. So I've never felt closer to her or myself or my mother. And you know, you hear about these therapies, but it was really cool to really experience it firsthand, and really powerful, and something that I just completely did not expect to happen. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Arlene. Next, we have Taylor Weekly, Celeste Landry, and Evan Rabbits.
Hi, my name is Taylor Weekly. I live in Nederland and work as an esthetician, which means I am also a therapist for many Boulder inhabitants. It has come to my attention that people sometimes need help addressing the more difficult parts of life, or fall into depression when they can't find the specific help or tools they need. That being said, I am speaking today in favor of decriminalizing psychedelics in Boulder. This is not just about recreational use and having fun. This is about giving people with mental illness the chance at a happy and fulfilling life without the use of mostly harmful medications and their side effects. Psychedelics actually promote neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. In the case of someone that has suffered depression for years, the overwhelming stress and sadness they experience literally atrophies the neurons in their brain, prematurely aging them and their brain, making it harder and harder to pull themselves out of their depression or even find joy in little things. One psychedelic experience has the power to rewire their brain chemistry. Parts of the brain that usually have no contact actually talk to each other, forming new neurological pathways. This gives the opportunity to be open to trying new things, meeting a new friend, making time for a therapeutic hobby like yoga or meditation, anything new and exciting to give them reassurance and get them out of the same depressive loop. We're at a very pivotal point in the evolution of our collective consciousness, and I believe that decriminalizing natural substances is exactly what is needed to cultivate a more unified, loving, and healthy community. Thank you for your time and consideration. It really means a lot.
Thank you, Taylor. Next, we have Celeste Landry, Evan Ravitz, and then I understand Mick Nichols has withdrawn, so then Sherry Ack.
Celeste, your mic is open. You're able to begin.
Will there be the slides?
If we have them, we'll go ahead and pull them up in a moment.
Do you want to do Evan next? And that's my phone.
Okay. Sounds good. Why don't we do Evan and while we're looking for your slides? So Evan, can you go ahead, please?
Evan, your mic is open. You'll just need to unmute.
Evan Ravitz, 42-year resident. Let's talk about Boulder exceptionalism. Philosophy professor Matthew Harris threatens mass murder at CU. God King Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche and his son are revealed as abusive sex cultists, while real Buddhist Win Bruce burns himself to death to protest climate arsonists like our drill baby drill governor. CU hires Trump insurrection attorney John Eastman and fires scientist Detlev Helmig for studying oil and gas emissions. CU invests student money in oil and gas, sealing their climate fate. Yet, city government caters to Governor Polis, CU, Shambhala, Excel, all the 800-pound gorillas. Boulder, where the roads are crumbling, swimming pools are half closed, and half the city department heads have left since 2019. But there's always millions to persecute the homeless and prevent people from using direct democracy to solve our own problems and problems caused directly by government. The new city manager, city attorney, and city IT director have their jobs because we exposed their predecessors lying, cheating, and defrauding taxpayers of $500,000, all to try to kill our online petitioning for direct democracy, which we voted overwhelmingly for in 2018. Yet the new administration told Boulder County Democrats a pack of lies when asked why the city wouldn't give adequate notice that the online petition system has been fixed. People aren't using it because they refuse to tell people it's fixed and waited months. I'll document the lies next time, as if you cared.
Thank you, Evan. So Celeste, unfortunately, we have not received any slides from you that we can find. Apologies for that. Would you mind just doing an audio testimony and then following up with the slides through email?
I can do that. Is it time to start?
Please do.
Okay, good evening, council members. In my brief 2 minutes, I'd like to say 3 things about elections. The first point is about using accurate vocabulary when discussing voter turnout. The decline in turnout between 2 different types of elections is actually called drop off. For instance, we notice a decline in turnout or drop off between presidential elections and midterm elections, both of which are held in even years. We also notice drop off between even year elections and odd year elections. Drop off should not be confused with disenfranchising voters. The second point that I'd like to make is about moving council elections to even years. The stated goal of such a move is to increase voter turnout, which I think we can all agree is desirable. However, there are other perhaps unintended consequences of moving elections to even years that might run counter to the stated goal. Consider that the drop-off in the remaining odd year election contests will likely be exacerbated, impacting a few different kinds of elections, including school district elections. And remember that more than half of our property taxes go to the Boulder Valley School District, state fiscal ballot measures, county and city ballot measures, and special elections. And speaking of special elections, by moving council elections to even years, we're more likely to see special elections in odd years to fill council seats as sitting council members seek higher office, such as state rep or county commissioner, or just go to work for a member of Congress. And finally, the drop off from presidential election years to midterm off cycle years introduces a new political calculation for council elections that doesn't exist now. I don't have enough time to fully make my third point, but I will send you all via email 2 possible ways to level the incentives to run for the new directly elected mayor position that I think you'll be interested in. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you for that, Celeste. Now we go to Sherry Hack, John Banashak, and Lynn Siegel.
Regarding a safe and welcoming community, here are some things for your consideration. The founder of the Hanuman Yoga Festival chose to relocate the festival outside of the city of Boulder this year for the first time ever due to concerns about safety and conditions in the area near Boulder High School and the Boulder Creek. At a previous city council meeting, I warned of businesses moving out of Boulder like they are in Seattle due to crime and public safety, and now it's happening. Another issue related to Boulder High School is on 4/20, apparently 2 men were trespassing on Boulder High School property and issuing threats, which was the cause for the lockdown that day. They were contacted by police but walked away and were never searched or positively ID'd. And in the last 2 months, we've had several incidents in Boulder, such as on June 2nd, a man was assaulted with a skateboard and left bleeding from the head. A woman with a history of multiple felonies that were dismissed caused a fatal accident and stole a car. Someone got a finger chopped off with an 18-inch machete on Pearl Street Mall. A woman was seen yelling profanities and swinging a heavy chain at people at a local park. A mother and son were threatened by a registered sex offender at a local park. A man exposed himself to a father and daughter, his 13-year-old daughter, on Goose Creek Path. Another man exposed himself at a vet clinic on North Broadway. There have been broken windows at multiple locations, including our municipal building. And there have been other incidents of people swinging hammers and axes and threatening bystanders. And twice, Boulder fire was called twice on May 23rd to 2 guys who had a fire going by their tent at Boulder Junction. They had an 18-inch machete in plain view. City Council has a responsibility to ensure public safety in our community. It's not to advance one's personal political agenda. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Sharon. Next, we have John Banashak, Lynn Siegel, and Holly Carlson.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. I understand that the Boulder City Council is still considering the West Pearl Street closure between 11th and 9th Street. There was a recent article where Richard Foy, one of the designers of the Pearl Street Mall, was asked his opinion about closing West Pearl between 9th and 11th. And Mr. Foy stated that we specifically did not design Pearl Street to be longer than 4 blocks. And after we designed it, there were something like 400 municipalities that designed pedestrian malls. Some were 6 or 8 blocks, but the bigger they are, the faster they fall. They died. There's only a dozen left. The rest have been returned to car tires and combustion engines. So we did it right, and we created a circulation around it with through streets and easy parking. Statistically, it would be a big mistake to extend the closure. It affects the whole mall. It puts it in the category of a longer mall, which the data says are the ones that failed most quickly. When City Council considers this, we ask the council to reopen to vehicle traffic. We also ask the City Council to limit the number of parklets and the very limited number of parking spaces on West Pearl. At one of the last meetings where this was discussed, there was some proposed limitations about the parking and the use of the parklets, but I can't seem to find where those limitations are published. And I would submit that as part of opening Pearl Street, West Pearl Street between 9th and 11th to traffic, the less parking spaces there are, the less accessibility will be. And the limited accessibility is really causing the problems that have caused the restaurant owners to overwhelmingly ask the city to reopen Pearl Street. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now we have Lynn Siegel, Holly Carlson, and then Emily Reynolds.
Stop me if you can't hear everything clearly. Alpine Balsam, where's the timer? There we go. Alpine Balsam. Do not take it down, repurpose it. The old hospital. Whittier, when are we going to get news on what was the cause of that? You know, I'm riding my bike there every day. I have to ride along the traffic in the dark with no light on my bike. And, you know, why don't you just open up the walkway there? There's no distraction. The thing is not going to fall down and cause liability. Like, just open the sidewalk there so that I can freaking ride my bike. Regarding LIHTC and Oz, these are schemes that will get us to have more affordable housing, okay, based on much, much more unaffordable housing. So it doesn't help us out. Be careful what you wish for. We don't need war in Ukraine. We've got it, plenty of it in Boulder, and it's called wealth inequality. I'm opposed to consent agenda on the sewer on F until you appropriate how much growth we're going to have here to do all this sewer, do all this water, you know, to over and burden our culture with too many people by excessive growth. And Excel Energy 2025, we need to get out of it. You know, I went through living hell about this tree that fell on my electric line, and Excel will not tell me if I'm responsible or if they're responsible. They won't even let me know. So I have to file a claim and all this stuff. Anyway, done, bye.
Thank you then. Last two speakers are Holly Carlson and Emily Reynolds.
Emily Reynolds, your mic is open. You'll just need to unmute.
The update on the Safe and Welcoming Spaces program has notable lacks. Specifically, next steps includes 0 additional actions to counter the campers illegally occupying and fouling public spaces. Such compassion for our transient population in this document, but little for protecting citizens from the public safety threat they represent. No one is suggesting a mean approach to clearing encampments, but many would like to feel safe in parks, public spaces, bike paths, and trails. Boulder alone cannot deal with the constant influx of transients. There's a huge number of agencies addressing this, but zero mention of inpatient drug treatment and mental health care. The ACLU didn't sue neighboring towns for their zero services. Instead, they chose the easy target, Boulder, with lots of services. When they dropped the lawsuit in exchange for what the majority on council wants, designated campgrounds, overnight parking, day shelters, the towns with no services will continue to send their homeless here to Boulder. We lack an effective approach to solving this health, safety, and criminal issue. I'd like council to take direct action. Denial is not a strategy. Boulderites are not safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Holly. Finally, we have Emily Reynolds.
That was Emily Reynolds.
I think I just spoke. Did you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we heard you. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies. We had the names wrong.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Are we all done then, Ryan?
That is, well, did we hear from Holly Carl?
I don't believe so. So it's
okay. Then let's go ahead.
Get Holly into the speaker list.
Go ahead, Holly.
Yes, that's me. Good evening, Council. Needing to have oversight on affordable housing in Boulder needs to be looked at and needs to be done immediately. Living in one of Boulder's first and smallest income restricted complexes that was built in late 2015, known as Depot Square, we are currently under a violation both structurally and fire code. We have not had regular maintenance done in over 2.5 years. Why is this? We are ran by a multi-million-dollar property management company called Avanath Capital Management. We are constantly having to do the legwork for our property manager in order to get anybody to listen to us. It has been the residents who have done the legwork in order to get certain sectors within Boulder to get out here and to look at our issues. Still, we are still waiting to get actual work done. Residents have not had any work done to their units, repairs, or whatnot in over 2 years. 75% of our building may be occupied at this moment. We are losing more than not. We are currently lacking power in our parking garage for going on a week, which poses many safety issues, as well as we have an issue with crime and car theft within our parking garage, which is attached to us. Yet we are the only affordable housing complex within Boulder that pays $75 per vehicle to park our vehicle in there, as well as we do not have the first 15 minutes free in this parking garage. And every other parking garage owned by the city of Boulder does. I wish you guys would take this issue a little more seriously, especially if you're pushing affordable housing, because as I see it as an actual resident, you have a major crime issue and a major issue with the property management companies that are running them, as they are running them into the ground. They are not taking care of them. They are ignoring the actual issues at hand, and you're going to have bigger issues than smaller ones when push comes to shove sooner than later. I thank you for your time and have a good evening.
Thank you for that, Holly, and appreciate that. Okay, that brings open comment to an end. Do we have any staff responses?
Mayor, if I can, I'll say that because it also came up at CAC that staff is looking to bring up a study session on our safe and managed public spaces work. So please note that we'll be bringing that at the next CAC as we're scheduling that. And then perhaps a bit because I'm feeling a little vulnerable tonight myself, I just wanted to thank those callers that shared their stories. Those personal reflections are touching and are heartfelt. And I just want to say it's so courageous when you share your stories in that way, and wanted to say I appreciated it.
Thanks for that, Maria. Okay, we've got a couple council members, Nicole and then Rachel.
I just wanted to echo Nuria's comments. I was feeling a similar appreciation for the folks who are willing to share about their struggles with mental health to get across some points to us. So thank you to everybody who was willing to speak to us tonight on the really personal topics.
Definitely. Rachel?
Yeah, I had just a question about the last speaker, Holly, who sounded like she was describing possibly some code violations in affordable housing units. And just wondered if staff could follow up with her. I believe she has emailed council members in the past and offered to give us tours to sort of see the area, which I'm hoping to go do. But I just wondered if maybe there are code violations, if a staff member could follow up.
I appreciate that. And I know that Chris has popped up and is able to respond if you'd like, Chris.
Sure. Good evening, Council. Chris Jones, Interim Director of Community Vitality. We can certainly follow up with our partners at Avanath Investments. They share ownership of the garage at Depot Square with the city. And so we do have a relationship with them. I would defer to Planning and Development Services regarding any code violations that might need to be inspected in the building. But we can certainly follow up regarding any challenges that are existing in the shared ownership parking garage.
Thanks for that. And again, I'm sure we have her email from sign up, but if not, she's emailed council, so I can get that for any staff that needs it. Thanks.
Well, and thanks for that, Rachel. I was going to bring that up as well, just so we can let Ms. Carlson know, like, what would be the avenue for her to contact city staff to express concerns about potential code violations?
We do have a council forum, but happily I can take Mayor Pro Tem's offer up. And if you send it to me directly, I'm happy to make sure that we follow up.
Great, thanks so much. Tara?
Yeah, I also wanted to say thanks, Holly, for coming on. And I'm concerned about the theft and crime in our parking garages of our affordable housing units. And I'm wondering if somebody can look into that as well. Is there any solution to that problem?
I will, again, I will follow up with our property manager that we collectively work with to manage a number of issues at the Depot Square garage specifically. This has been an ongoing topic related to some behaviors that we're experiencing at that location in particular, which has been quite challenging for some time. But we'll certainly follow up and can provide some written report once I hear back from the property managers.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. Okay, I think that's it. Rachel and Terry, your hands are still up. Do you have anything else? Okay. All right, I think that brings us to the end of open comments. So Alicia, could you take us to our consent agenda, please?
Of course, sir. Our consent agenda is item 3 on tonight's agenda, and it includes items A through G.
Wait, do we have any council questions or comments on those items? Not hearing any. Maybe a motion?
Motion to pass the consent agenda?
Second.
Okay, Mark, were you going to make a motion or do you have something else?
I actually had a question on the outdoor dining program. I am assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that passage of the outdoor dining program does not fully resolve the issue of what we do with West Pearl. Or does it?
Correct. This is not, we're not attending to West Pearl closure with this process. We're looking at the citywide outdoor dining pilot program first. Once we have tackled that particular element of the West Pearl closure, then we're planning to come back to council in September, a study session on September 8th to specifically talk about the downtown vision planning process and how that relates to future possibilities for West Pearl.
Perfect. And I had one other question with respect to utilities.
Can I, Mark, do you mind if I just jump in? Chris, I felt your language sounded a little ambiguous there. You just clarify, the outdoor dining is not making any statement for or against the closure of West Pearl, right? This is a separate issue.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Thanks for confirming that. Sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
And I had a question for utilities. we're going to have a 5% increase to fund, as I understood it, the $8 million capital expenditure. We're going to have some degree of increase for the 2 bond issues, I assume. Obviously, we're going to have an increase to finance CU South. And my question is, do we have a full schedule or projection of, let's say, in the next 5 years, what kind of increases we're going to be looking at in total? Because we tend to look at it project by project, and 5% here, 7% there, 12% there. Do we have a full breakout of what we're going to be looking at over the next 5 years for increases in our water bills?
Joe?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, members of council. Mark, thanks for that question. Every year in our budget process, we bring forward a 6-year capital improvement program, and I don't have the number off the top of my head. I think it's 30 or 40 projects that are in there, and we collectively, for each of the 3 utilities, have a rate increase for the following year that council is acting on in the budget, and then we show 3 or 4 years out in advance for each of the utilities. So we definitely will be bringing that information. If you would like it packaged differently than we typically do, we'd be happy to look at that.
Well, I would just like it packaged in the aggregate, not project by project, so we can see exactly what is planned for the next 5 years or 6 years or whatever period you choose to look at.
Sure, and maybe we can follow up offline, but we do for each utility present the rates in aggregate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sarah?
Yeah, I also have a question about the outdoor dining. Chris, I remember that we were talking about the modular units and whether or not we were going to allow non-modular units. Did we come to a conclusion on that, or are we still up in the air on that?
We are not, we're neither at a conclusion or up in the air. We do have 4 vendors who've responded to a request for proposals that all have some form of modular type infrastructure that restaurants can choose from if they are selected as our pre-approved vendors. That does not preclude restaurants' ability to pursue a revocable permit for something that's not one of our pre-approved structures, but the process for that will take longer. So we're trying to make sure we have an expedited process for restaurants that want to get this done quickly. If there are restaurants that have something different in mind, there still is our standard revocable permit review process. It just is not going to be as quick. And I don't want to speak too much for planning and development services. They're our key partner in the approval of these permits. And so hopefully I did not misspeak in the work that we're doing to try to thread the needle on what's possible in this program.
I think you hit the right balance, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Tara, if that answers your question, then we do have a motion and a second on the table, and we have a roll call vote. Alicia, should we do that?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll start this vote with Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Wallach?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
Benjamin?
Yes.
Mayor Brockett?
Yes.
And Councilmember Folk. I think that was it.
You skipped friend.
Friend. That's right.
It all, but
Thank you.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Friend, thank you. The consent agenda items A through G, sir, passed unanimously.
Thanks so much, Alicia. All right, and we have one call-up check-in, I believe.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And again, my apologies, Mayor Pro Tem. On our item 4 tonight, we have our call-up check-in item 4A, which is the vacation of a 20-foot wide utility easement at 2150 Folsom Street that is referenced under case number ADR 2022-00105.
Anybody want to call this up? No, I'm seeing lots of shaking heads. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any interest on that, so I think we can move into our public hearing.
All right, sir. Our public hearing tonight is item 5A, and it's the consideration of 6 proposed ordinances related to firearm restrictions in the city of Boulder. Those ordinance numbers referenced for the record are Ordinance 8494, 8525, 8526, 8527, 8528, and 8529.
Very good. And we have a couple of proposed changes to our rules of procedure. Should we go ahead and take care of those now? I'm seeing nodding from Teresa. So we have a couple of proposed motions. One is to suspend our council rules of procedures to allow for video testimony from Congressman Neguse. Bob?
Yeah, I'll make that motion. Congressman Neguse very much wanted to speak to us tonight about at the public hearing that we're about to launch, but unfortunately it's his job. He's in Washington. He's got some meetings tonight. So he was kind enough over the weekend to tape a videotape for us. I know we normally don't take videotapes from community members, but in light of the fact it's a congressman and I think he's gonna have some very important things to say, I'd like to move that for Councilman Neguse's testimony that we suspend our rules that normally don't allow videos and listen to and watch Congressman Neguse's video tonight.
Second.
Great. Let's see, I don't see any hands raised for discussions. Maybe I can just call for a vote. Matt?
I just want to make sure in process, even though we suspend this, will we then afterwards reinstate that rule ahead of public comment?
I would suggest we make the motion to just have an exemption for Congressman Neguse.
Is it just the exemption? Okay.
That's what I meant to say, but that's what my intention is.
Right. So one-time exemption. All right, this is a show of hands, so I'll just say all in favor. All right, that looks unanimous. Okay, we've got one other one, somewhat similar. We have several of our legislative representatives that are interested in speaking to us tonight, but we're only available at the 8 p.m. hour. So we're looking potentially for a motion to set a specific time of 8 p.m. for our invited elected local legislators to speak at that time. Rachel?
Yep, I will make that motion to invite our local elected representatives to speak at 8 p.m. tonight.
We'll second that motion.
All right, any further comments on that? Seeing none, I will go ahead and call for a show of hands in favor of this one. All in favor? Very good, that's unanimous. And so just procedurally then, the way this is going to work is that we're going to do staff presentation, we'll do council questions, then we will go to the public hearing, and what we'll do is we'll start with the video testimony from Congressman Neguse, and then we will go to our list of 29 speakers who've signed up until we get to the 8 p.m. point, at which point we'll pause the list of public speakers and then go to our legislators and then resume the rest of our signed up public speakers. So unless anybody has any questions on it, Rachel, your hand's still up. Very good. Let me hand it over to Teresa and Luis. I believe you all are going to present to us tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. Teresa Taylor Tate, City Attorney. I'd like to invite Luis to lead us through a presentation, first outlining how we got here, giving a bit of historical context, and then in an overview, present these 6 ordinances. Council has seen them before, but we feel like it's important for the record and for the public that we walk through what each of these is going to do tonight. So with that, and acknowledging his excellent hard work, I will turn this over to Luis.
Good evening, council members. I'm Luis Toro, Senior Attorney. Emily, could you start up the slideshow? Thank you. And as we stated in our memo, there's 6 proposed ordinances, and they're designed to address assault weapons, large capacity magazines, trigger activators and ghost guns, and otherwise regulate the purchase and sale of firearms in Boulder in ways calculated to reduce threats to residents of public places and the risk of impulsive suicide or crime posed by easy to obtain firearms. And to that end, we have these 6 ordinances. If we could move to the next slide, please. Want to talk about the long journey to today's hearing. In 2018, there was a mass shooting at a high school in Parkland, Florida, and in response to that, City Council passed ordinances that banned assault weapons and limited large capacity magazines to 10 rounds. That led to state court litigation that went on for a couple of years, and it resulted in 2021 with an order from the Boulder County District Court saying that our ordinances were preempted by state law, which said that municipalities were not allowed to have their own gun regulations. Now, we had a very plausible argument that that violated the home rule amendment to the Colorado Constitution and that we had the authority to do this, notwithstanding what the state legislature said. But the court ruled what it ruled. And the next item on the list, I almost felt like I could just put the date and everybody would know what I was talking about. But on March 22nd of 2021, Boulder joined the long list of cities that have been victimized by a mass shooting incident when 10 of our neighbors were killed at the King Soopers on Table Mesa. The ruling and the shooting and other events led to the state legislature revisiting the preemption statute and revising it to basically authorize municipalities to have their own gun regulations as long as they're stricter than state law, not looser. And that went into effect on June 19, 2021. We had asked the Court of Appeals to declare that to vacate the ruling and from the district court and say that it was moot because of the new statute, and the court declined to do so. After that, we voluntarily dismissed the appeal as moot because of the new statute, and with direction from council, moved forward with these ordinances. We had a study session in February 2022 when council went through various possible ordinances and gave us direction to proceed with the ones that we're talking about today. And if we can move to the next slide. We want to acknowledge that we've had assistance from nonprofit groups that are very expert in this area, and they've helped us to draft these ordinances. They're Every Town for Gun Safety and the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. And I want to acknowledge their great help, and without which we wouldn't be here today. Next slide, please. We also have a goal, ideally the state would regulate a lot of this, but they've given authority to cities to do it, so we're doing it. And we hope to work with our neighboring jurisdictions to have some consistency in gun laws across jurisdictions. And we're working with Boulder County, the city of Louisville, the city of Lafayette, and the town of Superior to try to get some consistency among our neighboring jurisdictions in these laws. Now, not everybody is going to pass the full package that we're passing, but we do hope to have a bit of a safe zone here, or a safer zone with some of these laws. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Now I'm going to walk through the various ordinances. 8494 is the first one, and the longest one. It in many ways is similar to the 2018 ordinances as far as banning assault weapons and limiting magazines to 10 rounds or fewer, and also banning rapid fire trigger activators such as bump stocks, some of which are being regulated by the federal government. The ordinance will also reenact or enact again our raising the age to possess firearms to 21, subject to existing exceptions for minors to possess firearms. It also adds a new severability clause, which is really a legal protection in the event that a court were to declare some portion of our ordinance to be invalid. This is expressing council's desire to preserve as much of these ordinances as possible and as much of our code relating to weapons as possible if any portion of it is struck down by a court. And finally, we're allowing people who own assault weapons as of July 1st of this year to certify them with the city and continue to possess them as legacy assault weapons, so long as they possess a certificate issued by the city that shows that it's a certified legacy assault weapon. And I want to be clear that the city does not maintain any record of who has a certificate. It's just that if there's a need to show that a person is lawfully in possession of a legacy assault weapon, that the certificate will show that, but the city does not maintain any sort of registry or record of who has these certificates. Next slide, please. Ordinance 8525 relates to possession of firearms in sensitive areas, and it prohibits possession of firearms in 3 general areas: city properties, public demonstrations, and polling locations, kind of the civic engagement, wanting to protect civic engagement from possible intimidation by people who are carrying firearms. We're also preventing liquor and firearms from mixing, prohibiting firearms in places where liquor is consumed. Then it's for other facilities, we're allowing firearms to be possessed only with the explicit permission of the operating authority. And to be consistent with state law, we're requiring signage to be posted where carry is prohibited. Next slide, please. Ordinance 8526 is the ghost guns ordinance. It's ghost guns or guns assembled from kits or manufactured on 3D printers that lack serial numbers. The federal government is beginning to take steps in this area, but in the meantime, the city will be prohibiting these. It's only a civil offense unless there's an intent to sell or distribute, and then it becomes a criminal offense. Next slide, please. 8527 is the open carry ordinance, and it generally prohibits open carrying of firearms in public places. There are some exceptions to comply with state law, and there's also the ability to carry an unloaded firearm in a locked, opaque case. And also, we're exempting from the open carry requirement private security guards in the course and scope of their duties. Next slide, please. 8528 and 8529 both address the risk of impulsive purchases of firearms that could lead to suicide or crime. One will require signage at gun shops warning of the dangers of gun ownership in English and Spanish. A lot of this information is not commonly known, but that possessing a firearm actually makes you more likely to be injured by a firearm than not having one, and we're making the public aware of that fact. 8259 is a 10-day waiting period similar to that's in other jurisdictions before taking delivery of a firearm. 10 days begin from the initiation of the background check. So if the background check takes a couple of days, that counts as part of the 10. And both of these are designed to address the problem of impulsive crimes or suicides. And the last slide, please. And this is just to show what the language of the notice that's going to be required to be posted at gun shops will say. And that's the information that we're requiring to be provided. So that's the summary of the various ordinances. And I think we can take the slide down, Emily, unless the council has any questions and wants to keep it up.
Thanks so much for that, Luis, and very much appreciate all of your work on these ordinances. Bob, question?
Thanks for that, Luis. That was very helpful and very concise. I have a question which I think I know the answer to, but I know that a number of community members have asked us, and so I wanted to say it out loud and hear the answer from you or Teresa. Yeah, on the list of places where, sensitive places where guns are not allowed or only allowed with the consent of the property owner, one of the things that was maybe noticeably not listed under Ordinance 8525 is public schools. Can you speak a little bit about that and what protections may already be in place on public school grounds?
Yes, the rationale, I can address that. The rationale for not including public schools is that the Boulder Valley School District is creating its own set of regulations that will apply district-wide, and so we didn't want to duplicate efforts and potentially have one set of rules for schools within the Boulder city limits and one for schools elsewhere in the district. So the Boulder Valley School District, it's my understanding, is going to have its own firearm restrictions.
Thanks, Luis. And am I correct in understanding that even currently, before they make whatever changes they're about to make, that the guns are generally prohibited on public schools? in public schools?
Yes, that's just like other property owners are allowed to bar guns. My understanding is that they're already prohibited at the public schools.
Great. Thanks, Luis. That's all I had.
Any other questions? Mark?
Yeah, just two quick questions. When we, in 8525, when we limited public carry in certain places, did we give any thought to health clubs, which get a large number of people?
I think that was mentioned, but it did not get put in the drafts. But that would fall under the general category of places that are allowed to prohibit, or it's private businesses which are allowed to prohibit firearms if they want to.
Okay, and my other question is, with respect to ghost guns, we've made violations a civil offense and only in certain cases a criminal offense. What was the thinking there?
Well, I think that it's not everyone who necessarily possesses these has an intent to use them, and there are kits and so forth, or people buying parts for legitimate reasons, and so we wanted to make sure that we didn't, accidentally ensnare someone who was buying parts for legitimate reasons and have them face criminal liability. But if you intend to manufacture a gun, then it becomes a criminal offense.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, one question on you mentioned required signage a couple slides ago, Luis, and not the required signage that's its own ordinance for gun sales, but if you're concealed carrying, I think, in sensitive areas, you mentioned required signage. And yes. I'm just wondering, like, we've flipped the default basically in some places that it's going to be presumed you're not going to be able to have to concealed carry in sensitive places if you're one of the listed categories. And in some listed categories, you can't overcome that default, even if you wanted to as a business owner. So who's got to display the signage? I'm just trying to figure out, is it, if you're in one of those categories where you can't exempt and you don't have signage, what happens? If you're in the category where, the default is flipped to no guns, if you don't have the sign up, is it assumed that you can carry there? I'm just trying to understand what that required signage is for.
It's to provide notice, and it's something that we will assist businesses in getting going. The city will initiate creating the signage and help them get it posted.
So for every business in those categories, they're going to need a sign unless they opt out.
That's correct.
And we're going to help with that. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Right, any other questions? All right, well then, seeing none, we can move to the public hearing and start with testimony from Congressman News. And then after that, we'll go over our guidelines.
Good evening, Mayor Brockett and distinguished members of the Boulder City Council. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak with you at this important City Council meeting. I regret that I can't be with you in real time, but my duties in Congress require me to be in Washington. I'm proud that tonight you will consider 6 pieces of important gun violence protection legislation that will undoubtedly make Boulderites and Coloradans safer. Our Colorado communities, as you know, have experienced the tragedy of the gun violence epidemic time and time again. From Columbine High School to Aurora to last year, when 10 precious lives were taken at the King Superstore on Table Mesa. As we continue to grieve for the families in Buffalo and Uvalde, we recommit ourselves to putting an end once and for all to these devastating tragedies. Enacting meaningful gun violence prevention legislation at every level of government will save lives. I applaud you for the actions that you are considering tonight. These decisions take courage. They take leadership. And I pledge to you that you will always have a partner in me, in my office, as we work at the federal level to do the same. Thank you so much for your service to our constituents. Take care.
All right. No, very much appreciate Congressman Neguse for his testimony. Okay, well, before we go to the general public, Ryan, could we just go back over or whoever's, maybe it's Sarah. Sarah, I think if you can go back over our guidelines for public testimony.
Yes, I'd be happy to, Mayor Brockett. My name is Sarah Huntley. I'm the Director of Communication and Engagement for the city. And because we anticipate we might have some folks testifying tonight who are not familiar with our processes and who may have come in later to this meeting, we thought it would be a good idea to just quickly go over our public participation guidelines. I am going to share my scope. Somebody has shared it with me. Thank you so much already. I appreciate it. I'm seeing some of those boxes though, Emily, but I'll work my way through it. So here in the Boulder community, we have been working with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversation. Our goal here is to encourage everybody to be able to testify regardless of their age, identity, lived experience, and political perspective. We want those diverse perspectives to come into the room, but we're also looking to support the physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, council, and participants in this process. If you are interested in more information about this vision and how it was created, we have a lot of information on our website, on the web page you can see on your screen. If you could go to the next slide, please. We do have some very specific rules of decorum that are found in Boulder Revised Code, specifically in support of this vision, and these will be upheld during this meeting and during the next period of public comment. So all remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business, so in this case, related to the ordinances that Luis just spelled out. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. We do prohibit obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability of conducting this meeting. Participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they are commonly known by. We did require participants to sign up in advance, as is customary with our city process, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. With the one exception of Congressman Neguse, which Council approved earlier this evening, all testimony on this matter will be audio testimony. I do believe we have some legislators speaking as well at 8 o'clock, and we will, if we are not through the public hearing, we will pause for them to be able to testify, and then we will return to our usual practices. And with that, Mayor, I think I have completed going over the guidelines that you requested.
Thanks so much for that, Sarah. All right, well, we have 29 people sign up to speak. Each person will get 2 minutes of testimony. And let's get going. We've got Megan Voss, Christina Gardner, and Lee Fisk.
Okay, I've got a Megan here. I'm going to allow you to talk, Megan. You can unmute yourself, but if you could just identify yourself by your full name, that would be appreciated.
Thanks. My name is Megan Voss. Can you hear me?
We can. Can we just wait for the timer to come on the screen, please, so folks can follow along with how much time they have? Thank you.
Good evening, City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm joining you as a Boulder resident, an educator, and a mom of 2 children who attend elementary school in BVSD. I live in South Boulder, a quarter mile from the Table Mesa King Soopers. On Monday afternoons during the 2020-2021 school year, my daughters attended an art class at Tinker Art Studio in the Table Mesa Plaza, and I grocery shopped at King Soopers since there was no school on Mondays in BVSD. March 22nd, 2021 was the only Monday all semester that we were not at Table Mesa. Instead, because it was spring break, I was playing outside with my daughters when the shooting occurred. We spent the afternoon listening to sirens and watching helicopters circle the store. Before the King Soopers shooting, I did not realize just how devastating gun violence would be for a community as a whole. Of course, I knew it was traumatic for the victims and their immediate friends and family, but I did not anticipate the continued persistent trauma for my family and for many families in our neighborhood. Over a year later, the shooting still comes up daily for my family. Both of my daughters have had anxiety about their safety and the safety of our community over the past year and 2 months. After the shooting, I felt powerless. Whereas many members of the community channeled their grief into activism, I was stunned and immobile. Now I recognize that this was an understandable response to trauma. Now, however, as gun violence continues to affect community after community, I feel compelled to speak up. Although there is no single ordinance that can prevent a massacre like the ones in Boulder, Buffalo, and Uvalde, the package of actions before you tonight makes substantial progress towards keeping firearms out of the wrong hands. In particular, raising the legal age of purchase to 21 and requiring a waiting period before a purchaser takes possession may have prevented the deaths in Buffalo and Uvalde. In conclusion,
I apologize, your time is up, but thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Christina Gardner, Lee Fisk, and Haley Brown.
Bear with me for one moment, please. Okay, Christina, you should be able to unmute.
Correct.
Can we get the timer up, please? Thank you so much.
Thank you, City Council members. My name is Christina Gardner and I live in South Boulder. As a mother of 3, a teacher, and a Mom to Men Action leader, I've been in the gun violence prevention movement for the past 5 years. I'm also a member of the Everytown Survivor Network due to the murder of a dear friend and colleague who was killed in a domestic violence attack involving a gun. As a resident of South Boulder, I also know the heartache that follows a mass shooting in one's neighborhood. I also know that the gun violence happening across our country is preventable if legislators take action such as these ordinances that are grounded in evidence-based research. As an educator and parent, I want to ensure that we are doing all we can to prevent all gun violence. Prohibiting firearms in sensitive places fosters safer spaces and also recognizes the continued trauma that survivors of gun violence deal with when repeatedly exposed to the open carry of firearms. Similarly, requiring waiting periods and raising the minimum age of purchase to 21 is backed by solid research. Data shows that 18 to 20-year-olds commit gun homicides 4 times higher than the rate of adults 21 and older. Likewise, introducing magazine limits and prohibiting assault weapons can help prevent mass shootings and reduce the devastation of daily gun violence. Finally, the proposed 10-day waiting period could have a substantial effect on gun suicide rates, since it helps create a buffer between someone being in crisis and having access to a gun. This is important when understanding that 90% of suicide attempts with a gun are fatal, compared to 4% of those not involving a gun. In the years since 10 people were murdered at our grocery store, mass shootings and everyday gun violence have continued in staggering numbers, and the toll is immense. Over 100 people shot and killed every day. Not a single week in 2020 has passed without at least 4 mass shootings, and 232 mass shootings from January to the end of May this year. We must not continue to let a lack of effective reform be the status quo in our community, our state, and our country. Thank you for introducing these ordinances, and please pass all 6.
Thank you, Christina. Now Lee Fisk, Haley Brown, and Stephanie Greenberg.
You should be able to unmute now, Lee.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, let's just get the clock. There you go.
Good evening. My name is Lee Fisk. I'm a Boulder resident, mom to 2 young daughters, and on the leadership team for the local chapter of Moms Demand Action. As we all know, 2 adults and 19 children were murdered by gun in Uvalde, Texas on May 24th, in their classroom days before the end of the school year. All those parents, families, loved ones who said goodbye in the morning and never got to see their child again. We all feel the heartbreak and anguish of those families. We are all reminded of so many mass shootings, now a daily occurrence in this country, including those in our own state, like Aurora and Columbine, and our own backyard with the tragic loss of 10 members of our Boulder community in the King Soopers shooting last year. Since Uvalde, only 2 weeks ago, there have been 33 more mass shootings in the United States. We all feel angry and powerless to create change when we have a Senate unwilling to take action. But the truth is, we are not powerless. Here tonight, we have the opportunity, the responsibility to take action. I want to thank our Boulder City Council members for taking seriously the threat that guns without appropriate common sense regulations pose to our community. And I implore you to pass the 6 local ordinances under consideration tonight. With the passage of SB 256, local officials in Colorado can now protect their communities from the devastation of gun violence by passing common sense gun safety laws. You, as our city council, have the power to keep guns out of sensitive places like schools, prohibit assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and better regulate gun dealers. Not only can you save lives in our community, but by doing so, you can also set a powerful example for other municipalities. We know that cities and towns across the country are watching to see what Boulder will do. Without a doubt, passing these ordinances here will encourage local gun safety regulations elsewhere. As a mother and a gun violence prevention advocate, I ask you to please help us turn our collective heartbreak into real action that will save lives. Please pass these ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Next, Haley Brown, Stephanie Greenberg, and Caitlin Russell.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for giving me a moment to speak. My name is Haley Brown, and I live in Boulder, right next to Howard Houston Park, with my husband and my 7-month-old daughter. I'm here tonight to speak in support of the package of 6 ordinances related to firearm restriction within the city of Boulder. There have already been over 200 mass shootings this year in the United States. 200 instances of 4 or more people being killed by a firearm in a single incident. This number doesn't even reflect the number of accidental deaths, homicides, or deaths that have occurred this year from suicide by a firearm. According to the CDC, an average of 633 Coloradans die each year from gun suicide, and it makes us the 17th highest state in the nation. We have to take action. Our federal government may be immobilized, but you, our local officials, have the authority to take meaningful action. We don't have to wait in Boulder for another instance of gun violence at one of our schools or at another one of our grocery stores. By passing common sense gun safety laws, you're protecting our community. You're protecting my 7-month-old daughter, who in just a few years, I'm gonna send to Boulder Valley schools. And I checked this morning, we are zoned for Columbine Elementary, and I'm so excited. I can't wait for her to go to school and meet her classmates and learn and thrive. But I also want to do whatever I can to keep her and her classmates safe. Research shows that firearm restrictions, like the ones you consider tonight, can help prevent mass shootings, injuries, and fatalities, and reduce the devastation of gun violence. Each of the 6 ordinances will have a direct impact in reducing gun violence. Together, they'll make Boulder a much safer community. So please vote yes on each of these ordinances, and thank you again for letting me speak.
Thank you, Haley. Next, we have Stephanie Greenberg, Caitlin Russell, and Rick Healy.
Stephanie, I see you here with your first name. When I turn you on, if you could just fully identify yourself before you address council, I'd appreciate it.
My name is Stephanie Greenberg, and I'm a 40-year resident of Boulder. I'm representing myself as well as Colorado Faith Communities United and Gun Violence, which is an organization of 47 faith communities, as well as the Colorado Coalition Against Gun Violence, whose membership consists of over a dozen diverse organizations. I urge City Council to pass the entire package of evidence-based gun violence prevention measures. Together, they represent a comprehensive approach to this public health problem that we face. Here are just a few reasons why. First, assault weapons and the accessories that maximize their lethality are rarely used for self-defense and typically used in mass murders. They are designed for the battlefield and have no place in civilian life. Second, people between the ages of 18 and 20 commit 16% of murders, but comprise only 4% of the population. It's also an age group characterized by impulsivity. Preventing this age group from buying firearms will help to decrease mass murders, other homicides, and suicides, which are so often acts of impulse. Third, city-owned spaces such as parks, playgrounds, open space, recreation, and community centers are all places where families with children tend to congregate. Allowing guns at these locations presents risks that no family and no child should have to encounter. Fourth, firearms without serial numbers, often called ghost guns, do not require a background check and cannot be traced by law enforcement. They are frequently owned by those who couldn't pass a background check and are found by police at an increasing number of crime sites. Fifth, in this era of almost daily mass shootings, the open carry of firearms in public places, unless by law enforcement or private security guards, will often and unnecessarily provoke fear and intimidation. And finally, requiring a 10-day waiting period before a buyer can take possession of a firearm affords an opportunity for anger and interpersonal conflicts to subside. People driven by impulse to attempt suicide will have an opportunity for the crisis to pass and to obtain help. This cool
Stephanie,
down period
I'm afraid
gives
your
people a
time
second
is up.
chance, which
but-
guns too often take away. Thank you for the
But thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have Caitlin Russell, Rick Healy, and Ari Freilich.
Mayor, I am not seeing a Caitlin Russell. As I mentioned to you earlier, we do have one phone call in listener, and I've been unable to rouse that person by text message. So do you mind if I just unmute that person quickly to see who that is on our list?
Sure.
Okay. I am trying to talk to the person who's called in with an 882 number. If you could press *6 and unmute yourself and just identify who you are so we make sure we call on you at an appropriate time, that would be helpful. You are unmuted, but we can't hear you. You may also have to press the unmute button on your phone if you have one.
Andrew O'Connor, can you hear me now?
We can. I see you both in the meeting virtually on computer, Andrew, and by phone. Just needed to see who you are. I will allow you to speak when we get to you. Would you prefer for us to use your phone audio or your computer name?
Phone, I would prefer to do it this way.
Okay, then I will come to you as soon as we get to you. We just couldn't tell who the caller was, so bear with us for a few minutes, okay?
Thanks.
Okay, we'll get back to you, Andrew. All right.
Okay, so I'm not seeing a Caitlin.
Right, so no Caitlin Russell. Caitlin, you can join later and we'll slot you in if you can. Instead, next we have Rick Healy, then Ari Freilich, and Kathleen Ashworth.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm not seeing a Rick Healy either. I do know we have Ari here. Ari, I will go ahead and give you an option to unmute.
Yeah, hi, good evening.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. My name is Ari Freilich. I'm State Policy Director for Giffords, the gun violence prevention organization led by former Congresswoman, gun owner, and gun violence survivor Gabby Giffords. Wanted to express our strong support for this package of gun safety ordinances, which would implement some reasonable but critical protections to ensure Boulder is doing everything it reasonably can to keep its residents safe from gun violence. Last year, my organization was proud to help pass state legislation to reform Colorado's firearm preemption laws and empower local communities like Boulder to enact the sort of gun safety reform measures proposed today, measures tailored to the needs of this community and residents' hunger for stronger efforts to address the leading cause of death for children in this country. A lot of people were recently reminded in the most horrific ways imaginable why gun safety policy matters so much. We saw a gunman perpetrate indescribable horror in a classroom in Texas with an assault rifle that this proposal would effectively finally prohibit in Boulder. He was equipped with 30+ round large capacity magazines that this proposal would prohibit. He purchased those weapons immediately on the day after he turned 18, whereas under this proposal, Boulder would require civilians to reach the age of 21 and implement a 10-day cooling off waiting period. This measure would help limit access to the military-style weapons used in nearly all of this nation's deadliest mass shootings and which have been used to perpetrate the vast majority of public mass shootings. It would limit access to other abnormally dangerous devices like bump stocks that were used by a gunman in Las Vegas, where he shot bullets to the bodies of nearly 500 human beings. The proposal would regulate untraceable and serialized ghost guns to ensure that people who can't pass a background check to buy a gun, including minors, can't just circumvent our laws by having DIY gun build kits shipped to their doors anonymously with no regulation, background check, or serial number. I think I'm going to run over time, so I'll just abbreviate here at the end and say, to be clear, these proposals will make an enormous difference. The Second Amendment is not under threat, but we are. In states that have enacted measures like these, children are half as likely to be shot to death compared to the national average. Thank you for your time. I urge your support for this package.
Thank you, Ari. Now we have Kathleen Ashworth, Elizabeth Smith, and Jill Grano.
unmute. My name
can hear you.
Okay, my name is Kathleen Ashworth. I've been a resident of Boulder since 1996. I am co-chair of St. John's Gun Violence Prevention Network, St. John's Episcopal Church, Boulder. I'm also a member of Colorado Faith Communities United in Gun Violence, and I'm a member of Gifford's Colorado chapter of Gun Owners for Safety. I am in support of all the gun ordinances proposed by the Boulder City Council today. I'm going to speak briefly about Ordinance 8494. I would like to talk about assault weapons. Why do people want to ban assault weapons? Because they have been used in some of the most deadliest mass shootings in history, including Sandy Hook, San Bernardino, Pulse, Las Vegas, Sutherland Springs, El Paso, Boulder, and now Buffalo and Uvalde. Trauma physicians say exit wounds can be as big as an orange. Why do people want to ban large capacity magazines holding more than 10 rounds? Large capacity magazines have been used to increase the death toll in mass shootings, including at the Aurora movie theater shooting and the King Super shooting. Why ban rapid fire trigger activators? To circumvent the significant restrictions on machine guns, the gun industry has marketed devices that can be attached to semi-automatic firearms and accelerate the weapon's rate of fire to rates approaching automatic machine gun fire. These devices, including bump fire or bump stock and trigger crank devices, were designed to skirt the limits of the federal law. Why raise the legal age to purchase firearms from 18 to 21 years of age? Individuals between the ages of 18 and 21 commit gun homicides at 4 times the rate of those over 21. Any states which have limited, I'm out of time, sorry. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Elizabeth Smith, and then Jill Grano is not present, so Lisa Sweeney Moran, and then Lynn Siegel.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Elizabeth Smith. I am a relatively new resident of Boulder, and I am also an attorney. And I wanted to quickly share my experience in my former home state, which has shown me how crucial it is for Boulder to lead on this issue and how closely related culture and economic prosperity are. My family and I moved here from a Rust Belt state in the Midwest, one whose economic prospects continue to decline as the economy continues to move away from traditional manufacturing into technology and service. The state is losing population and talent, especially younger people who are leaving for places like Boulder and Denver and all along the Front Range to find good jobs and a good lifestyle. My experience in my home state taught me how directly prosperity and culture are related. Over the past 20 years, I have watched the culture of my former home state regress in tandem with its economic prospects. As companies left, businesses downsized or closed, in came the individual rights rhetoric of gun culture. It was all their leaders had to offer. All good people, many good people, followed them off a cultural cliff of anger and fear. Boulder cannot afford a culture that pretends we are back in the Wild West. It is home to a major research university campus, several federal labs, and a growing biotech industry. 21st century culture and economic activity need common sense gun regulation to thrive, and everything that is proposed is common sense. If you lead, people will follow, and we will.
I'm afraid your time is up, but thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, and Jill Grano is not present. We can slot her in later if she shows up. So Lisa Sweeney Moran, then Lynn Siegel, and Kathleen Salmon.
Hey all, I speak to you tonight with a few hats. As the executive director of 2 shelters here in Boulder that support women and children, many of whom are the victims of violence. As the Vice President of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education, and as someone who grew up here in the city and has lived here for the better part of 42 years. But most importantly, I speak to you tonight as the mother of 2 young children. Of course, like all parents do, I do everything I can as a mother to keep my kids safe. But there's always a place where my reach ends and the community has to take over. And gun violence is one of those spaces. One of the areas where I have to count on you to help me keep the people I love safe and to keep our shelter residents safe and to keep our students safe. So I'm asking you tonight, pass every measure you can to limit guns and gun access in your community. And thank you so much for the time and dedication you've given to this issue.
Thank you, Lisa. Lynn Siegel, Kathleen Salmon, and then Brett F.
Stop me if you can't hear perfectly well. I thought it was rather disingenuous for Joe Neguse to say he's in Washington, D.C. and he can't be here. This is a Zoom meeting. It's 9:19 at the time that he spoke. I'm sure he didn't have other meetings he had to go to then. I just thought that was kind of interesting and revealing. You know what the other F word is? Fear. Don't go there. Don't go there. Bad word. The worst possible curse word is fear. We need no guns. I'm not supporting any of this tonight because we need absolutely no guns anywhere, all the way up to nuclear, which is where the big F word comes and which is where all of our affordable housing woes are happening because we're sending all our money to fight somebody in Ukraine. We're going straight back to 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Shame on us, nationally, internationally, and locally. You know what Trump said after that shooting in Texas? Lock the door. You can stop intruders. Guess what? The intruders were in Texas. They had to find the janitor to unlock the door so that they could go in and shoot the guy. What a joke. As far as long distance issues, Alyssa bought his gun in Arvada. So what we need is not just Denver. We need the whole world to say no to any firearms. And Bob Yates and Matt Benjamin said they have guns. I'm stunned that you could admit it when the fact is it's more dangerous for you to have one. What an admission.
And your time is up, but thank you for your testimony. Now we have Kathleen Salmon, and it's Brett Foth, I believe, and then Rachel Daly.
Mayor, Kathleen Salmon is here. She's on an older version of Zoom. So my only option for unmuting her is to promote her to panelist. I can do so, and we can ask her not to turn her video on and just testify if you're willing to approve that.
That's fine. Please proceed.
So Kathleen, you're going to get a quick blip on your screen, and it's going to say you're promoted to panelist. Please only turn on your audio.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. My name is Kathleen Salmon, and I am speaking in support of the 6 ordinances tonight. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have also been living in Boulder for the last 10 years. I work with children and their families in my private psychotherapy practice here in Boulder. Both after the recent Uvalde shooting and the local shooting at King Soopers, I counseled many of the parents that I work with on how to address tragedy with their children. I also counsel the teenagers that I work with around their anxieties that they too will be shot while at school. No child or family should be having these conversations about these sorts of tragedies, and no one should be afraid to go to school. SB 256 declared that officials of local governments are uniquely equipped to make determinations on regulations of firearms necessary in their local jurisdictions. I urge you now to pass all the 6 ordinances that are being considered tonight. All 6 would assist in preventing mass shootings and gun violence and suicides. As a mental health provider, I can speak to the fact that passing Ordinance 8529 that adds waiting periods to firearm sales will reduce suicides. Suicides, especially by young people, are often impulsive. If the purchase process is slowed down, it will give so many people an opportunity to also slow down and make a different decision, or for a professional, family member, or a friend to intervene. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Kathleen. Next, we have Brett Foth, Rachel Daly, and Andrew O'Connor.
It will just take me one moment to return Kathleen as an attendee. Okay, I see Brett. Brett, you should be able to unmute. Brett, if you can hear me, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm speaking with you guys tonight because I want to bring some real common sense to these common sense gun laws. As city council members, you guys have no right restricting our Second Amendment right, especially while allowing Boulder to be a sanctuary city. Criminals from around the world can come here without being pursued. It will be a big mistake to start restricting legal citizens' rights to defend themselves. Far more lives are saved each year by guns than taken by guns. Everything you guys are voting on tonight is just virtue signaling. In case you guys forgot, criminals don't obey laws. Nothing being proposed will stop mass shooters. And according to statistics, it might actually cause more mass shooters to target Boulder. According to a study done by the Crime Prevention Research Center, 89% of mass shootings between 1988 and 2019 occurred in gun-free zones. During the same time, an FBI study stated that 88% of mass shootings were premeditated, meaning they were planned. When these angry individuals see these signs saying gun-free zones, they and other criminals will target these places knowing there won't be anyone armed there to stop them. If another mass shooting happens in Boulder at one of these gun-free zones, the victim's blood will be on your hands. Thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Next, we have Rachel Daly, Andrew O'Connor, and Jody Sklauer.
Hello, Council. My name is Rachel Daly. I live in Gun Barrel here in Boulder. Thank you, Council, for your important work on to prevent gun violence by enacting common sense laws in our community. Many will say, what's the point? Boulder is merely 28 square miles in this very large nation, but I disagree. Change must start at home, in our backyards, in our schools, and in our neighborhoods. We have to act in the capacity that we can, and I am proud to see that you're doing that here in Boulder tonight. I have 2 daughters that go to school here in Boulder. I'm sad to say that my kids, ages 12 and 9, don't feel safe at school. This is gut-wrenching, but not a subject that can be shied away from. This is the reality of the world they are growing up in. The truth is, I don't feel safe either. I don't have all the answers, but I do believe that sensible measures like the ones that you are considering tonight are an important start. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Rachel. Next, we have Andrew O'Connor, Jody Sklauer, and Terry Crook.
Andrew, I'm going to turn on your phone since you requested to be able to testify. You may have to press *6 and/or mute on your phone to be heard. *6 should get you to unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Andrew O'Connor, and I'm a former public defender and drug court attorney. I'm a Boulder County resident, and most importantly, I'm the father of a 14-year-old daughter who attends BBSD schools. I worked on the original assault weapons ban. There is a sickness in America. It is our gun cult, which has no counterpart in any other advanced democracy. Republican politicians, the gun lobby, and gun makers are complicit not only in weakening gun laws, but also in glorifying firearms and encouraging their sale. Sales of assault-style weapons generate the highest profits of any other guns. I am sick and tired of worrying about my 14-year-old daughter getting shot at school. We don't have to live like this. America is a country with more guns than people, and where many teenagers can purchase a military-style assault weapon before they can legally buy a drink or cigarettes. Republicans blame everything else but guns for mass shootings. The U.S. is doing it all wrong. All such explanations ignore the obvious rejoinder that our culture is pretty similar to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Britain, and these countries don't have anywhere close to the same levels of gun violence that we have. If England, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand can solve this mass slaughter of innocents, then so can we. Please pass these ordinances tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next we have Jody Sklar, Terry Crook, and Kevin LaRusso.
Jody, I see that you're in the meeting. You're here as your first name only. We do ask that you give your full name before you testify after I unmute you.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, my name's Jody Sklar. Thank you all for considering this gun violence prevention ordinances. I'm a Boulder resident and mom of 2. 4 years ago, when 17 students and teachers at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas were murdered, I mourned here in Boulder. I went to high school in Parkland and was crushed by this news. I felt pretty alone, as this was much more personal for me than it was for my friends and neighbors. Unfortunately, that all changed last year when Boulder had a personal experience of 10 lives being lost to gun violence. And now today, it's even more common to have a personal connection to gun violence tragedy than it's not. There's a lack of rules on guns statewide and nationally. It almost feels impossible to get anywhere. But more of us need to stand up and speak out for what is right. This is about gun responsibility, not controlling law-abiding citizens' guns. The fact that local municipalities can enact their own laws now, stricter than the state laws, shows that we can make progress. We must start locally and put on the pressure on Colorado legislature statewide to pass more life-saving laws. I appreciate the members of the City Council considering local action today. Bob Yates spoke on behalf of a responsible gun owner, and that is much appreciated. We need more responsible gun owners to speak out for what is right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Jody. Next, we have Terry Crook, and then we have 3 people who don't appear to be in the meeting: Kevin LaRusso, Janine Harrington, and Kenneth Kansian. If they appear later, we can slot them back in. So we'll go to Terry and then Katie Farnham.
Terry, we can hear you trying to speak, but it's all static. I don't know if others are experiencing the same problem. Can you try again? Similar problem. I'm going to suggest, Mayor, that we go to the next speaker. Terry, I suggest you leave the meeting and come back in again, and we'll call on you in a little bit. Maybe test your microphone in the meantime, because we can't make sense of what you're saying.
Okay, well, let's go to Katie Farnham then, and then I think it'll be time for our legislators.
Oh, hello. My name is Katie Farnan. I am a resident of Boulder and a mom with 2 kids in BVSD. I am a grocery shopper, and I have nothing to say except pass these ordinances, and thank you for doing this. It is a good step. One thing I will say, the majority of violent crime in the US is homegrown, for those who found it necessary to bring citizenship into the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Katie. And actually got a couple more minutes. Let's do Bruce Parker.
Hello, I am Bruce Parker, and I have been the Deputy Director of Boulder County since November 1st, 2021. If I were testifying on behalf of myself, I would share with you the ways that my life was forever changed due to my father being killed in an act of gun violence when I was 2 years old. But today I'm here to speak to you on behalf of Boulder County and LGBTQ+ people in Boulder and beyond. We need look no further than the Pulse nightclub shooting that took place in Orlando, Florida on June 12, 2016, to know the very real threat that unregulated access to firearms pose to myself and members of my community, the LGBTQ plus community. 49 people died that night and more than 50 were wounded. Transgender and gender nonconforming people have been uniquely impacted by gun violence. Since 2013, nearly 2/3 of fatal violence towards transgender and gender nonconforming people have involved a gun. The overwhelming majority of those victims were Black transgender women under the age of 30. Guns impact LGBTQ plus communities, not only through mass shootings or acts of random gun violence. LGBTQ plus people are more likely to commit suicide because of their harsh treatment by society. The #1 use for guns in the United States is suicide. Suicide accounts for 6 out of every 10 gun deaths in our country. Here in Colorado, it's 3 out of 4. Far too often, even well-meaning people talk about these problems like they have no solutions, when we know some of the solutions, and we know those solutions can save lives. You are considering 6 measures tonight that can make a huge difference in decreasing gun violence in our communities. On behalf of Boulder County and the LGBTQ plus community, I'm asking you to please support all 6 of those measures. Help keep us all safer, but particularly those of us who are at a higher risk of violence and suicide. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you in advance for voting the correct way to protect people like me in this community.
Thanks so much, Bruce. Okay, I see we have Representative Judy Amabile present, and as well as Representative Edie Hooten. And let me just ask, let's see. I wonder, could we get maybe a motion to allow our legislators to use their video as well? Because I believe we only accepted Congressman Magoo's before.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Can I get a show of hands? Great. Okay. So let's see. My eye fell on Edie first. So Edie, thank you, Representative Hooten, so much for joining us. And why don't you go ahead and speak to us? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brockett, and thank you everyone for who's joined the call, and to our council members for these proposed ordinances. I'm sure that everyone here is familiar with what they do, and a few of them were triggered by legislation that was passed after the King Super shooting. Senator Fenberg and I were sponsors of one bill, and that's the ban on assault weapons, the sale of that, and a few other things in Boulder County. And Representative Amabile carried another bill, but clearly we're quite supportive of the ordinances, and we encourage council members to vote in favor. It's very important that we locally exercise the authority that we have to protect our communities to the extent that we can. And I think it's worth noting that I have not received one email or one communication over social media in opposition to these ordinances, which I think may be an indication that there is some positive movement taking place, not only in the state, but nationally. And I'll let my colleagues speak to their experience with that. I will say, as a legislator, I have observed many times the value of local action, especially when communities take action that is quite similar, the way it percolates up to the state level and informs state legislators and motivates them to take action, and how states do the same thing when they act in coordination on an issue, and the way that impacts activities at the federal level. So I think it's just an important reminder for everyone that this action at the local level will make a difference. And especially that now that we've got Louisville and Lafayette taking the same actions, and we know that other communities around the state of Colorado will do the same thing too. So with that, I want to thank the council members again for offering these ordinances, and for Councilman Benjamin and Yates for their excellent guest editorial in Sunday's paper. That really was absolutely a perfect summary of what these ordinances are attempting to do, the gravity of the situation, and how impactful it is for us to act locally. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And with that, I defer to my colleague.
Representative Mobley.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting us to come here and talk today. I just want to express my deep gratitude to the City of Boulder for leading on this issue. And we already see that leadership really matters, because the Boulder City Council started, and already Superior, Louisville, Lafayette, and other municipalities are looking at following suit. And also, I think that I want to echo what Rep. Hooten said, which is that the state will also follow your lead. Once we get enough cities telling us you have to act. And it is a little bit more complicated for us because there are more of us, and we have more people who we have to get on board before we can get things passed. But I am incredibly grateful and honored to be a member of this community and to have you all representing us on this issue. So I just want to touch on the thing that is the most meaningful for me, and that is this waiting period. So several years ago, my son was having a mental health crisis, and he decided he was going to buy a gun to kill himself. And we found out about that. He went to a gun shop, he did a background check, paid for the background check, and just by luck, the background check did not come back instantly. But just to be clear for anyone who doesn't know, we have instant background checks here. You normally can buy a gun in about 10 minutes. His background check did not come back instantly. His father and I went to the gun shop and begged them, please don't sell him this gun. And they showed us, this is the gun he's going to buy. Here's how much it costs. Here's the paperwork. And we don't actually have a legal mechanism to not sell the gun. But we persuaded them by crying and yelling and begging. And they wrote on his paperwork, don't sell the gun. But they told us he seems like a very nice young man. And under normal circumstances, we would have no reason not to sell the gun. And I believe that that little bit of luck on that background check saved my son's life. And so I do hear people saying, well, what does it do to act locally? But here's the thing, even if we saved one kid, and that kid was your kid or my kid, then I think it would be worth it. And I don't think there's a parent out there who wouldn't agree with that. And so again, I just want to say I really applaud you for taking these steps, and they will save lives. And it's not everything we need to do, but it is meaningful. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Representative Malo. It was very powerful. All right, we also, I believe, have Senator Steve Fenberg with us as well. Can we bring Senator Fenberg online?
Senator, you are a panelist, so you may unmute and turn on your video yourself.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Brockett, and thank you, Council and everyone who has been working on this issue. I'll echo a lot of what has already been said, but the context and the background here is no state, as far as I know, prior to Colorado, has actually repealed a state preemption on having local communities pass ordinances around gun violence prevention. This is something that the gun lobby and others have shopped around state by state in the 90s and early 2000s. And Colorado was the first state in the country to reverse that. Obviously, as a state, even though we are a Western state, sometimes seen as a libertarian-minded state, we have passed several really smart, common sense, I think, life-saving policies at a state level when it comes to gun safety. I'm sure several have been mentioned, and folks are very aware of them, whether it's the red flag law, the universal background checks, which we even expanded recently, safe storage requirements, requirement to report lost and stolen, high capacity magazine bans, several pieces. And I do think many of them are working in concert with each other to collectively create an environment that has saved a lot of lives. But there's one law that we passed a year ago now that I think is going to end up being one of the most impactful. And that's the one that I'm speaking about, which is the repeal of preemption. And that's where you come in. And that's why the work that you are doing is so important, because we knew that even if we passed all of the laws that we wanted to at a state level, it's not going to be enough. And we really need to empower local communities to have these conversations based on what is needed, what they are seeing on the ground, and what they think is right to keep them and their citizens safe. And so what's happening today, the discussion in Boulder is exactly what we wanted to happen. And I think it's really important to recognize that this has been an incredibly thoughtful exercise on your part. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. Once you were given the ability, it's not like the next day you rushed and just passed a boilerplate ordinance. But clearly, you have thought about this. You have coordinated with other communities, discussed with experts and with folks who have been victims. And this is what is needed to go above and beyond what the state has done, what the community has told you is important, and that will result in creating a safer community. And it might not be what works everywhere, but I think we will see over the next few years, community after community along the Front Range replicating a lot of what you are discussing here. And I think that's incredibly important, because the landscape when it comes to how we think about guns and the role that they play in our lives and the violence that can result from them, it's different in every community, to be honest. I mean, guns are different in Sterling, Colorado, or Brush, Colorado, or in Delta County versus Boulder. And that's okay. But with that also means that local communities should be able to have that discussion about what is best for their community based on that relationship. So I think a lot of communities are going to learn from this. They're going to replicate it. And I think that will have a bigger impact than even just in Boulder. And as others have said, and I know Representative Amabile has said this, the idea is partially not just because some cities and communities are different from one another, and so you should have that ability and that right to have that discussion at a local level, but you can be a laboratory to help influence the state to know what are the best practices. How do waiting periods get implemented in a way that will save the most lives? How can we be smart and strategic about banning weapons that have the ability to cause incredible havoc and harm and murder? Those are the pieces that I think you are going to learn, that we are all going to learn from this experience, and is going to act as sort of a laboratory for smart policy that I think will result in saving many, many lives down the road. So, again, what you are doing with this ordinance is incredibly powerful, incredibly important. And I will say is exactly what the legislature had in mind when we passed the bill to give you the ability to have these community discussions and to pass local ordinances, because that's where this discussion really should live. You are closest to the citizens in many ways that we all represent, and you should be able to do what is, I would say, is the fundamental function of government, especially local government, and that is to keep your community and citizens safe. And that's what you're doing today. So I applaud everything that you were doing. It is incredibly important, and again, is following exactly in line with what we have in mind, and what we think as legislators who voted for that policy is exactly the types of policies that and ordinances that will result in lives being saved. And that's, at the end of the day, what matters. So thank you so much for your work. Thank you for the discussions you've led and been a part of for a long time now, but especially over the last year and a half or so. It means the world to me and my family as residents, but also as a public servant, knowing that in many ways the baton has been handed to you, and it'll come back to the state, because there's a whole lot more work we have to do at a state level as well. But this is a partnership, and I'm excited that it's happening in this fashion. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council.
Well, thank you so much for that, Senator Fenberg, or I should say Senate President Fenberg. So we're just so grateful for your words and for your actions. So really appreciate very much all of three of you being here tonight, Representatives Hooten and Amabile and Senator Fenberg. And let me just say, after the horrendous tragedy at the King Soopers in Boulder last year, the way that you all sprung into legislative action immediately was really inspiring, and a comfort to us in dark times that you took very seriously the horrific tragedy that we suffered through, and gave us the ability to enact our own legislation, which we're now moving forward with right now. So just our gratitude is very deep. So thank you so much. Very good. Well, that ends the legislator portion of our public testimony. And do we have Terry Crook back, Sarah?
We do. Let's give it a try and see if his mic is working.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can. I'm sorry. It's Miss Crook. We can hear you now. Oh, now we can't. We could hear you loud and clear when you asked us. So whatever you were doing then, do that again, please.
Well, Terry, I apologize. I'm afraid you're not coming through. It may be an internet problem on your side, or I don't know what, some kind of technical difficulty. But I'm afraid we're gonna have to move on. Maybe we can try one more time a little later. Okay, our next three speakers are Pamela McMillan, Tina Pittman-Wagers, and Eric Budd.
Hi, my name is Pam McMillan, and I want to first thank council members for the opportunity to speak. As a mother of two young daughters in Boulder, I speak in favor of the 6 ordinances to prevent gun violence. According to the CDC, gun-related injuries became the leading cause of death among children and adolescents in 2020. This statistic is sobering and sickening to any parent, only fueling our anxiety for the safety of our children. After every mass shooting, I feel nauseous when I drop my kids off at school, and I have a knot in my stomach all day as I worry about their safety. We should not have to live like this. Our kids should not have to fear going to school to learn. Parents and children have endured enough trauma from these acts of gun violence, and it is past time to implement stronger gun laws. We should have taken action 23 years ago after Columbine. I want to thank you in particular for reproposing an assault weapons ban and banning bump stocks. Research shows that restrictions on assault weapons can help prevent mass shooting injuries and fatalities and reduce the devastation of daily gun violence. Parents also want an ordinance that prohibits open carrying of firearms in public places.
We shouldn't have to worry about a firearm when we take our kids to the playground. Allowing guns in parks where children play, at crowded demonstrations, or other sensitive areas puts us all at risk. We have the opportunity to make Boulder a safer community to live. By passing all 6 ordinances, Boulder will become a more attractive place for people to raise their families. Thank you for your time and your commitment to improving the safety of our community. Please vote yes on all 6 ordinances.
Thank you, Pam. Next, we have Tina Wagers, Eric Budd, and Fred Barton.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Tina Pittman Wagers, clinical psychologist and teaching professor emerita from CU Boulder, and also happy to represent Moms Demand Action tonight. I wholeheartedly support the proposed gun ordinances currently before the council, and I'm delighted to see our community move towards these important steps. Lately, we've heard the argument that mental health, not guns, is to blame for the tragic gun violence we've experienced. I want to say a few words to explain why that is an unproductive conclusion. Scientific studies repeatedly find that people with mental illness are more likely to be victims rather than perpetrators of violence. In numerous studies, mental illness is not a reliable predictor of violence towards others, including an important study from the FBI focused on mass murders. Only a tiny percentage of people with serious mental illness ever commit violent acts. Current research on violence is much more focused on factors like childhood trauma, angry thoughts, personal grievances, life stressors, and disinhibition, none of which are mental health disorders. But the most compelling evidence against the mental health gun violence argument is this: about 1 in 7 people around the globe have 1 or more mental or substance abuse disorders, including the US. Indeed, rates of mental illness in the US are comparable to those in many parts of Europe and Australia. However, the rate of gun violence in our society is 25 times higher than in countries with similar economic development and social conditions. Blaming gun violence on mental illness further stigmatizes a population that's already struggling and is just unhelpful from a predictive or explanatory standpoint. Access to guns greatly increases our risk of societal violence. Thus, I'm thrilled that our community is focusing on the actual problem through these ordinances that will reduce easy access to guns. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Next, we have Eric Budd, Fred Barton, and Eric Walls.
Thank you, Council. Eric Budd, I live in Boulder. I really appreciate City Council taking on this issue, and it's one that's really something that's been led by leaders in the Democratic Party, but this is something that really benefits everyone in our city, and it's so important, so thank you. And I also want to thank Reps Edie Hooten, Judy Amabile, and Senate President Fenberg for speaking. I think it is part of their work that has enabled this tonight, and they said that. And I strongly support you all passing these measures, including the assault weapons ban. And I do also want to put a little pressure back on our legislators that while we're seeing action from Boulder, we're also seeing action from Louisville and Lafayette city councils tonight, which is really exciting. But there are certain things that we simply should be doing at a state level, which I think we should be looking at an assault weapons ban. You know, it's something that we've experienced here in Boulder. We know that we know the limits of what we can do in our own municipality. We saw this with a mass shooting that we had last year with a gun that was bought in Colorado outside of the city of Boulder. And I'm asking our legislators to do more. And so I really appreciate you all moving forward on passing these measures and continue to put this in your state legislative plan to have the city of Boulder be an advocate for more protections at the state level. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. Now we have Fred Barton, Eric Walls, and then Jennifer Mapley.
Hello, did that work?
Yes.
Oh, great. So this is Fred Barton. I'm a Boulder resident now for about 18 years, father of 3 boys, and I'm, as at least 2 of the city council members, a responsible gun owner. I am opposed to the measures that the city council is considering. I didn't have much time to prepare a nice long, 2-minute long speech because I only found out about this about an hour before the meeting. This issue, unlike some of the others that have been discussed so far in the meeting, is a very divisive issue for our community. There's not been nearly as many people participating in this discussion as there has been in the previous discussion, mostly because people probably don't know about it. I would highly suggest and recommend that instead of making a unilateral decision on something that is so divisive to the community, that the city put the issue to a ballot measure and allow the city, the individual citizens of the community to determine their viewpoints and have a voice in deciding which way the city decides these issues. As an aside, I know of for during the crime wave of the pandemic that we had, there's many people that are negatively affected by these, potentially by these issues. I know of an 80-year-old woman who was robbed twice in one day, came to buy a gun in a gun store because she was so concerned. And had she been made to wait, she wouldn't have felt nearly as safe for the, hours later that she got robbed or attempted robbery again. So sort of in closing, I'm opposed to these measures being decided by the city council. I think that all the citizens should be allowed to vote on this themselves. That's all I have.
Thank you, Fred. Next, we have Eric Walls and then Jennifer Mabry, and then we'll check on our previous speakers who weren't here.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm not seeing Eric Walls in the room. I can go to Jennifer Mabry. She is here.
Very good.
Good evening, Council. My name is Jennifer Mabry. I'm a Boulder native and live in South Boulder. I was at King Soopers in Table Mesa just 4 hours before the slaughter. I'm here to urge our City Council, state, and federal officials to take steps like Australia to reduce, to work, to eliminate access to assault weapons intended for war. You, our leaders, have failed us and failed two generations of children who don't have fancy white-gloved lawyer on K Street to fight for their rights for freedom, innocence, or life. Our city and our county and our country need to turn off the spigot of sale of these mass assault weapons and offer programs for buyback and destruction of these assault weapons that are already in circulation. We'll never get control of this situation if we do not eliminate guns entirely. These ordinances are the least that we can do, and they should be a start, not a finish. I urge you to pass these 6 ordinances. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Jennifer. Sarah, do we have anyone else who had signed up but wasn't present earlier?
I'm just taking a quick look. I am not seeing anybody. We still have Terry Crook, but I'm not sure that the situation has improved. We could try one more time if you would like.
Let's give it a real quick try.
Okay. Terry, do you want to try to unmute one final time? No, I'm so sorry. Would like to invite you to send your testimony in to council. There is a contact council form on the webpage, and I'm sure that they will all be interested in reading your thoughts. Apologize, we haven't been able to make the audio work tonight.
Okay, well, with that concludes our public testimony. And I just want to thank everyone for weighing in and giving us your thoughts. There's some very powerful statements. We appreciate everyone for joining us. So that brings us back to City Council for a discussion on the matter. We've got Rachel with her hand up.
I'm just ready to make a motion if it's time, but if anyone has discussion, I will hold it.
Please do. I welcome the motion, Rachel, and then we can discuss it from there. Thank you.
I move that we adopt the following ordinances relating to gun violence prevention: 8495, 8525, 8526, 8527, 8528, and 8529.
Do we have a second?
I second Rachel's motion.
Very good. Rachel, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I would love the opportunity. Thank you. And I do want to say I've got COVID right now, so my voice is a little bit out, and I thank you all for bearing with me. Last year, Boulder joined an ever-growing list of cities traumatized by mass shooting violence. This event has left an indelible mark on our community. So I first want to take a moment to remember the community members who we lost last year. Trelana Barkowiak, Suzanne Fountain, Terry Leiker, Kevin Mahoney, Lynn Murray, Ricky Olds, Nevin Stanisic, Denny Stong, Officer Eric Talley, and Jody Waters. They're never far from our hearts. The ordinances under consideration tonight are intended to reduce gun violence in our community, and I hope that in taking this action, we honor those 10 individuals, as well as all others both within and outside of Boulder, who have fallen victim to the gun violence epidemic plaguing our country. Each proposed ordinance falls within the realm of acceptable limits on gun ownership as defined by the US Constitution, is refined by US Supreme Court decisions such as DC versus Heller, and is prescribed by Colorado state law. I believe that our number one job as elected officials is to safeguard our community members, and these ordinances can help us to do so. So I will be voting yes on all of the measures. I also want to thank a few people: Governor Polis, Senator Fenberg, and House Representatives Amabile and Hooten. As has been discussed previously, I'm deeply grateful for the part that each played in the state of Colorado repealing preemption, which enables cities, including Boulder, to enact gun laws to best protect our communities. To my colleagues, as well as to the 2018 Boulder City Council, simply stepping into this politically fraught space can be tough, and I am sincerely grateful for everyone's willingness to be here. I also want to thank city staff who do all of the real work in the city, and I want to thank Giffords in Everytown for providing guidance and support along the way on this journey. Thank you to Congressman Neguse for speaking up a second time in favor of gun violence prevention efforts here in Boulder, and to all of our community members who've emailed and testified and supported these efforts. I'd like to especially recognize survivors here in Boulder. I'm sure that every time you speak up in honor of your loved ones or about your own harrowing experiences, it exposes a never healed wound. So thank you for stepping into that space. Gun violence continues to escalate in a maddening trend upward that is daunting to watch and horrific to experience. But shrugging or turning away and accepting a worsening status quo is not okay. Implementing common sense gun laws is the right thing for us to do. I'm frankly frustrated that it is left to cities to enact these laws that the federal government, or at least state governments, could and should be doing. Boulder alone cannot create all the protections needed to keep our community members safe from all forms of gun violence. But voting on these ordinances tonight is what we can do for our community. Banning assault weapons, large capacity magazines, rapid fire trigger activators, and ghost guns, prohibiting open carry in public places, raising the age to purchase firearms from 18 to 21, prohibiting deadly weapons in city buildings and other sensitive areas, requiring critical information to be shared out with potential gun purchasers at the point of purchase, and instituting a 10-day waiting period are all ordinances that can save lives right here in Boulder. And these measures will be all the more potent and effective as cities throughout the region enact their own ordinances. I applaud our neighbors in Superior, Lafayette, and Louisville. Louisville, I think, got in ahead of us and has passed their ordinances unanimously within the last hour. And cities around the state who are also taking up gun violence prevention ordinances in the wake of preemption being repealed. Together, I hope that we can make the city of Boulder, the county of Boulder, and all of Colorado an even better place to live. I am really proud to be part of this council, which is willing to reject the status quo on gun violence. And I hope all of my colleagues will join me in voting yes on all of the ordinances tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you for that, Rachel. Bob, would you like to speak to your second?
I would. Thank you, Aaron. Like Rachel, I want to first thank the organizations and the people who helped us prepare this legislation. We are indebted to Giffords Law Center to prevent gun violence and to Everytown for gun safety. Both organizations assisted us in drafting these ordinances based on best practices they were seeing around the country. I also want to thank the local chapter of Moms Demand Action for their tireless advocacy over the last several years. I want to thank the hundreds and hundreds of Boulder residents who wrote to us, bolstering our courage. I want to thank all of the people who took time out of their lives and away from their families this evening to speak at our hearing tonight. And I especially want to thank City Attorneys Teresa Tate and Luis Toro for their drafting, revising, and steady legal advice, aided by our able assistant, Taylor Ryman. But I want to say my biggest thanks to my City Council colleague and my friend, Rachel Friend. Rachel has lived and breathed gun violence prevention for more than 4 years, long before she was elected to the Boulder City Council. As a community member in 2018, Rachel was the leading champion for the gun violence prevention legislation that we passed that year. Since joining council, Rachel has been tireless in advocating for sensible gun laws to keep our families and our community safe. And Rachel not only led the formulation of Boulder's legislation that we will pass tonight, she has been a steady and reliable resource for the communities around Boulder who are passing their own gun violence prevention legislation, some of them acting this very night. Rachel, I know that you have only another year or so left in council, but the legislation that we will pass tonight will be your lasting legacy. I will be voting in favor of all 6 pieces of gun violence prevention legislation. As a lawyer, I believe that these 6 ordinances have been crafted to comply with state and federal law. As a responsible gun owner, I believe that these ordinances are not unduly burdensome on those who want to own guns safely. These 6 ordinances identify dangerous and unusual weapons, vulnerable potential gun users, and sensitive places where guns used inappropriately can do the greatest harm. I do not need to repeat the statistics on mass murder using firearms, domestic violence shootings, gun suicides, or accidental deaths. They are stated well in the ordinances themselves. They were cited in the op-ed that Matt and I published on Sunday and in my newsletter yesterday. And we have heard them from our eloquent speakers this evening. Simply stated, guns in the wrong hands or in the wrong places kill tens of thousands of people each year, many of them children. The ordinances that we will pass tonight will be our modest attempt to try to save some of those lives. But it will take far more than a set of ordinances passed by the Boulder City Council to save the lives of another 40,000 people who will likely be killed by firearms in the United States over the next 12 months. It will take courage and action by cities and counties across our state. It will take courage and action by our state legislature and our governor. It will take courage and action by our Congress and by our president. But perhaps more important than government action, saving lives will require the responsibility of gun sellers, gun owners, and the family and friends of vulnerable people intent on hurting themselves or on hurting others. We are responsible for the health, safety, and well-being of each other. That's what makes us human. My mentor, the former president of Colorado State University, taught me this. Humility is the recognition that your life could collapse in an instant. As we pass these essential gun violence prevention measures tonight, let us be humble. Let us recognize that with the simple pull of a trigger, anyone we love could be taken from us in an instant. Let us try to remove that threat. Let us come together and learn to live safely and peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Bob. Would anyone else like to speak to this? I see Mark has his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I begin, I'd like to second Bob's comments, especially the thanks that he has offered to our colleague Rachel Friend and the work that she has put into this subject for so many years. And yes, this will be your legacy, Rachel, and a well-earned one. In the past few weeks, Buffalo and Uvalde, like Boulder, have become members of a club that no city wishes to join. Those that have become victims of senseless mass violence. As a member of that unhappy club, it is appropriate that today Boulder takes actions to address the conditions that permit such violence to occur. But first, let's be clear. We're not taking away guns. People have the right to possess guns to defend their homes, to go to a firing range, or to hunt. All we are doing is taking measured and reasonable steps to make it less likely that guns will fall into the hands of the mentally disturbed or suicidal, and less likely that there will be easy access to weapons of war to commit the atrocities that so many communities have experienced. The late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia noted that the right to bear arms, quote, was not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever, in any manner whatsoever, and for whatever purpose, unquote. He was correct. And today we take careful and limited steps in the spirit of that language, and in the recognition that the obscenities of King Soopers, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Uvalde, and Sandy Hook, among so many others, should be unacceptable to a civilized society. As elected officials, it is our first and highest responsibility to keep our communities safe. Today, we take a significant step in support of that obligation. Accordingly, I am very proud to support these ordinances, all of them. The necessity to act is clear. Our power to act is also clear. And today we shall act for the protection of the city we call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Nicole, and then Matt.
It was really hard to sit here and listen to all the testimony tonight. I think I saw some of you likely in a similar place of struggling with that. It really brings up all the times in our own lives where we've been touched by gun violence, where our lives and those of people we love have been torn apart. And so I will be supporting all of these ordinances tonight. But I wanted to thank everybody who was willing to overcome their own fear and trauma to speak to us tonight, to advocate for the safety of our whole community. There were a few things that some folks said during the public hearing that I wanted to lift up that just really resonated with me. Rachel Daly said we have to act in this capacity we can. Andrew O'Connor said we don't have to live like this. And Jody Sklar said more of us need to stand up and speak up for what is right. We can't solve national problems, but we can make our residents, our community, a little bit safer. We can do what we can with the tools that we have at our disposal to protect our community. And ultimately, that's really what I feel our job is on council, to keep our community safe to the best of our ability. That's what we're doing here tonight. And I just want to echo everybody else's thanks to staff, to my colleagues who've been working on this far longer than I have. And just thank you for everything that you've done to move this forward and keep our community safer.
Thank you, Nicole. Matt, and then I'll call on myself.
I'm going to put my hand down. I thank you, Aaron, for the opportunity to say a few words. And I certainly, I think, take the space to recognize the emotion that comes through talking about these things. And as Nicole put it, the testimony was raw and heartfelt and necessary for the subject we're dealing with and have been working through for a long time. And we've had daily reminders of why this is so hard, and especially because of having gone through it ourselves in our community. I want to absolutely echo what Bob said in the just unequivocal gratitude towards Rachel and her tireless work over the years. I'm not sure we would be here if it weren't for her leadership, and not just leadership, but the empathy in which she drives for the change that has, led us to these moments. So I thank you for that, Rachel, and thank the previous councils for building the foundation from which we can work from tonight. I also want to thank my colleague, Bob Yates, for standing with me and talking as responsible gun owners for why we feel that these ordinances do not infringe on the Second Amendment, and that it's going to take more responsible gun owners to stand up and say enough is enough, and to hopefully tip the scales to this long-standing, meaningful change, not just here in Boulder, but through the state and hopefully around the country. So I'm hopeful for that. And as Ari said it earlier, the Second Amendment is not under threat, but we are. And these ordinances, I think, are a step in that direction. Boulder is still grieving the loss of 10 family members, friends, neighbors, and coworkers, and we will be for a long time. And so I support these 6 ordinances wholeheartedly, because doing nothing is an endorsement of the status quo, and that's not something that I'm willing to live with. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Well, I'll just offer a few words. I'll start with the thank yous. Bob did a great job of listing all the people who've worked so hard on this. So thanks again to staff who've done this, worked so hard on this, and to call out Rachel as well. Rachel, for your tireless work on this. It's actually how I first met you, was when I got a phone call, on this topic 4 odd years ago, and you were a tireless advocate then, and you continue to be. And thank you for that. And then I also want to call out from our effort in 2018 to ban assault weapons, Jill Grano, Councilmember Jill Grano, and because it was her initiative that first brought this forward in 2018. So I'm grateful to her for starting us along this path. I was say, gun violence is a scourge on our society. Tens of thousands of people are killed by gun violence every year. And last year we were visited by that scourge in our own city in the King Soopers shooting, when we lost 10 beloved community members. And we've seen horrendous tragedies happen over and over again in our country. And after so many of them, no action is taken. And I do very much appreciate our legislature and our governor stepping in and passing new legislation to address these issues and to give us the ability to act here locally. And so I'm very proud to be part of City Council and part of a community that supports us, to say that thoughts and prayers are not enough, that we have to take the actions that we can with the tools that we have available to us. So I'm very proud to support these ordinances today. They will make our community safer. And thanks again to everyone for everything that you've done for this effort. And I'm looking forward to our vote tonight. And I think this may be the time for it. Does anyone want to offer any final comments before we move to that? Lauren.
Thank you, Aaron. I just wanted to echo what so many people have already said. Like any important issue, I think that, gun violence is too big for our community to solve on its own. But like these other important issues, it's also, weighs too heavy on us to not move forward in the ways that we can, and to do as much as we can. I'm so proud to serve on council with all of you, to take on this issue. And so proud to be a part of this community that brought, forward so much bravery tonight.
Thank you for that, Lauren. All right, Alicia, I believe we have a roll call vote in front of us.
That is correct, sir. Thank you. We will start this roll call with Mayor Pro Tem Friend.
I'm a big yes.
Councilmember Joseph.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
Wallach.
I am proud to vote yes.
Weiner.
Definitely yes.
Yates.
Absolutely yes.
Benjamin.
Enthusiastically yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
And Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Mayor, the 6 ordinances related to gun violence prevention that include Ordinance 8494, 8525, 8526, 27, 28, and 29 were passed unanimously and adopted.
Thank you so much for that, Alicia. Thanks so much to my colleagues here. I have a tear in my eye. This is it's an important moment, and it takes courage to pass measures like this. So thanks again so much to everyone who's helped to make this happen. Okay, Well, that concludes our agenda item here. And Alicia, do we have anything else for us tonight?
No, sir, that was our last action item on tonight's agenda.
Very good. Any final thoughts on the meeting, everyone? Anyone?
I want to say thank you all for the kind words. That was a little too much. I'm really proud of us.
No more than you deserve, Rachel. Tara.
I want to agree with what Lauren said, and just I'm so deeply touched and thrilled to be a part of this tonight. I know I didn't say anything, but as you all know, one of my sister's best friends, Jody Waters, was killed in that shooting, and I'm not going to say that we feel better, but it is at least something, and I'm sure it means so much to so many of us that were unfortunately touched by that, affected by that, not by that day. And I'm thinking about Officer Talley and how brave he was as well at this time. And I'm just really want to give each one of you a hug, and the community as well. Thanks for being with us, for supporting us, for so many kind words, and for a wonderful civic discourse.
Thanks, Tara. Okay, well, seeing no others, I will go ahead and gavel our meeting closed here at 8:50 p.m. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night.